Chapter 473, The Dragon Blood Gem Mine. Chapter 473, The Dragon Blood Gem Mine. Magic Flame Lord is domineering, as we're part of the same camp and the Dragon Blood Gem Mine is in our territory. He agreed to share the gems with us 50/50ths. However, I heard that because our previous lord has died, Magic Flame Lord intended to hog all of it. Though you are our lord, I'm afraid Magic Flame Lord would not pay you any mind, Binghua said in a solemn tone. Oh, really? Jian Wushuang said with a smile. He had read the information on Magic Flame Lord and knew about his character. Binghua, Jian Wushuang said while looking at him, let's go visit Magic Flame Lord. Visit Magic Flame Lord? Now. Binghua was surprised. Yep, right now, Jian Wushuang replied with a faint smile. Soon after that, they set out. The Magic Flame territory was next to the Blood Sword territory, so they had contact with each other. One day later, Jian Wushuang arrived at the Lord Mansion in the Magic Flame territory. Please tell your lord that Blood Sword Lord pays him a visit, Bing was said to a guard of the Lord Mansion. Blood Sword Lord. The guard glanced at Jian Wushuang and sneered. A Saint Realm expert dares to call himself Lord? Piss off. Binghua's face fell. But Jian Wushuang wore an indifferent expression as he slowly opened his mouth. Magic Flame Lord. Jian Wushuang cried out. His voice seemed to be full of magic, reverberating through the entire mansion and lasting for a long time. A peevish, glum elder had been absorbed in a manual when suddenly he heard the voice, narrowed his eyes, and raised his head. When he stepped out and appeared in the sky above the mansion, he immediately saw Jian Wushuang with his hands behind his back. Magic Flame Lord was shocked and a little bit angry. He had not participated in the exploration of the Puppet Master Cave Mansion, but he knew what had happened there. He knew many experts died, and an expert named Swordsman rose in the fight. Swordsman was only a Saint Realm expert, but he had overwhelming strength which could terrify intermediate lords. In the fight for the 4 interspatial rings, Swordsman killed Demon Soul Lord and Myriad Islands Lord by using some techniques. Demon Soul Lord was a superior lord. Although Myriad Islands Lord was just an advanced lord, he was the top master of formations and was not weaker than a superior lord. However, they had all been killed by Swordsman. Moreover, Swordsman had a puppet fighter at the Marquis level. Therefore, Swordsman had already become famous among the two camps. Sir, are you Swordsman? Magic Flame Lord went over and said with a smile as well as a hint of modesty. Sir. Binghua was a bit surprised, as Magic Flame Lord treated Swordsman respectfully. Magic Flame Lord, your guard didn't let me in and was even unwilling to send a message for me, so I had to shout. Please excuse me, Jian Wushuang said with a faint smile. On hearing this, Magic Flame Lord's face fell. He looked toward his guards. The guard who had refused Deng, whose request was terrified, dripping with cold sweat. Idiot, come and apologize to Sir Swordsman. Magic Flame Lord scolded him. The guard immediately kneeled down and offered his apology. Don't worry about it. Jian Wushuang waved his hand. Then he looked at Magic Flame Lord and said, Magic Flame Lord, I've just taken up the post of Blood Sword Lord, so I came to pay you a visit. Blood Sword Lord. Magic Flame Lord was a bit shocked, but he immediately realized why Jian Wushuang had come here. Sir, no? Blood Sword Lord, let's go down and have a chat, Magic Flame Lord said. Fine. Jian Wushuang nodded, and then gave an order to Binghua. Stay here. Okay. Binghua nodded respectfully. Jian Wushuang and Magic Flame Lord then left. Bing was stood in the void with an odd look on his face. What happened? Why did I feel that Magic Flame Lord was in awe of our Lord? Right, he must have been in awe of him. Otherwise, he would not have treated our Lord so politely. Not long after, Jian Wushuang walked out of the Lord Mansion, while Magic Flame Lord personally saw him out. Bing Hua, let's go, Jian Wushuang said. Then they left for the Blood Sword territory. Magic Flame Lord finally felt relieved. On the way back to the Blood Sword territory, Bing Hua asked in curiosity, Lord, what did you say to Magic Flame Lord? Nothing. We were just having a courteous talk, and I casually mentioned the Dragon Blood Gem Mine. Jian Wushuang said. Casually mentioned. Bing Hua frowned. Right, that was enough, Jian Wushuang said with a smile. Don't worry, Magic Flame Lord is not stupid. He should know what to do. On hearing this, Bing Hua did not ask anything further. Soon after they came back, Bing Hua received the news that the people from the Magic Flame territory had withdrawn from the Dragon Blood Gem Mine and clearly indicated that they would not step foot in the mine again. Bing Hua was stunned. In his mind, Magic Flame Lord was extremely domineering. When did he become so kind? Bing Hua did not know that Magic Flame Lord was just overbearing toward the weak, like the previous Blood Sword Lord, who was a novice lord. But when it came to Jian Wushuang, things were different. Even an advanced lord or a superior lord would treat Jian Wushuang politely. Magic Flame Lord was just an intermediate lord, so he did not dare to act in a domineering manner. He even worried that he might piss off Jian Wushuang and get killed by him. The Dragon Blood Gem Mine and even the Blood Sword territory calmed down. Jian Wushuang had solidified his position. The 5th day after they returned, the Marquis Piaoxue camp sent something to him. Finally, Jian Wushuang thought with a hint of expectation. The thing that the courier had sent here cost Jian Wushuang 80,000 battle achievements. Chapter 474, The World Scroll. Chapter 474, The World Scroll. Mr. Swordsman, here you are. The courier gave an interspatial ring to Jian Wushuang. Thanks, Jian Wushuang said, and then let him leave. Bing Hua, Jian Wushuang gave him a glance. Lord, Bing Hua replied respectfully. Ever since Jian Wushuang visited the Magic Flame territory and made Magic Flame Lord relinquish the Dragon Blood Gem Mine, all the generals had become obedient to Jian Wushuang. I need to do a closed-door meditation. Don't interrupt me unless it's something very important, ordered Jian Wushuang. Okay. Bing Hua nodded respectfully. Soon after, Jian Wushuang arrived at a secret chamber in the Lord Mansion. He sat with his legs crossed and turned his hand over, where a scroll then appeared. World Scroll. Jian Wushuang looked at the scroll with a flicker of anticipation in his eyes. He had exchanged 80,000 battle achievements for it in the treasure vault of the Marquis Piaoxue camp. There were numerous treasures in the treasure vault. Some treasures were very helpful for experts to comprehend the origin, like the World Scroll, which was considered the most valuable among the treasures related to the comprehension of the world origin. Jian Wushuang was able to afford a treasure valued at 80,000 battle achievements because he had contributed the most in the Puppet Master Cave Mansion and received 120,000 battle achievements. He opened the World Scroll and then started studying it. Meditating for a while, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes with a smile on his face. This scroll contains a whole world indeed, Jian Wushuang said. The World Scroll was similar to the cottage world that he had encountered in the Baima Cave Mansion, but more delicate than the latter. An expert could only meditate on the cottage world once, and his talent determined how long he could meditate on it. However, an expert could meditate on the World Scroll at any time. It's a pity that I could only meditate on the cottage world once, but now this world scroll is more exquisite than the cottage world. Moreover, I can meditate whenever I want. There's no time limit. Jian Wushuang nodded with satisfaction. The world scroll was very useful to him. He took a deep breath and moved his mind. Then a blood-red figure appeared beside him. The figure wore a scarlet robe and a wicked scarlet mask. He was Jian Wushuang's slaughter doppelganger. In the Nanyang continent, Jian Wushuang's slaughter doppelganger had gotten killed once. Soon after that, his slaughter doppelganger formed again, but he rarely used it. Now, his slaughter doppelganger could help him a lot. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and gave slaughter doppelganger the 6-story pagoda that he obtained from the puppet master cave mansion. The 6-story pagoda contained 6 slaughter restrictions. The first restriction held 999 types of slaughter occult, which were a shortcut to the slaughter Tao. The 6-story pagoda was precious to a warrior who was meditating on the slaughter origin. The world scroll was only designed for comprehension of the world origin. From now on, I will focus on meditating on the world scroll and world origin, and my slaughter doppelganger has started meditating on the first restriction and slaughter occult, Jian Wushuang thought. His true self and his doppelganger worked separately, and with the help of 2 treasures, he was yielding double the results. As he stayed in his secret room, quietly perceiving through meditation, time passed by. In the Marquis Piaoxue campsite, Spirit Lord stood respectfully on the top of a huge pagoda. In front of him, a young man in a long silver robe casually sat on the step, supporting his forehead with his hand. Spirit Lord. The young man spoke in a warm voice. Marquis. Spirit Lord looked at the young man. The young man was Marquis Piaoxue, one of the 72 marquises in the Divine Land. 100 years have passed. Sword-suppression Valley will open again. Su Ming has sent invitations and invited many sword principle experts to take part in this meeting. As one of the 72 marquises, I also received the invitation. Master Su Ming asked me to recommend 3 experts, but it's not easy to find 3 sword principle experts, Marquis Piaoxue said in a low voice. Sword-suppression Valley? Master Su Ming? Spirit Lord raised his eyebrows. He had high status and knew a lot, so he knew about Sword-suppression Valley. Marquis, Master Su Ming asked you to choose 3 sword principle experts, so the 3 experts should not be too mediocre, or Sir Su Ming will get angry. Spirit Lord said. You're right. Marquis Piaoxue spread out his hands. Our camp has lots of experts, but as for those who are qualified to go to Sword-suppression Valley, I thought for a good while and can only assign 2 experts. One is Hunjian Lord. He has awakened his sword soul, so he's qualified for it. The other is Tianming Lord. Though he hasn't awakened his sword soul, he is remarkable in sword principle and adept at varied first-grade sword techniques. He even created a powerful sword skill. Those 2 lords are excellent. As for the third one, I've thought of several experts, but I feel that none of them are strong enough to go to Sword-suppression Valley. On hearing this, Spirit Lord said with a smile, Marquis, if the last expert has not been determined, I can recommend one. Who? Marquis Piaoxue looked at him. Bloodsword Lord, swordsman, Spirit Lord said with a smile. Swordsman? Marquis Piaoxue was a bit surprised. Last time, you talked about the fight in the cave mansion of the inner area and seemed to mention swordsman. I remember you spoke highly of him. Yes. Spirit Lord nodded. He is amazing. Though he is a Saint Realm expert, his battle strength is superior to many intermediate lords. More importantly, he is proficient in sword principle and has awakened the double first-grade sword soul. Chapter 475, The Heart-Killing Sword. Chapter 475, The Heart-Killing Sword. Double first-grade sword souls. Marquis Piaoshui's eyes lit up. In Sword-suppression Valley, they all pay more attention to those with a gift for sword principle instead of strength. In the past, most of the attendees were lords, but sometimes Saint Realm experts took part in it. Swordsman has awakened double first-grade sword souls, which means he is powerful enough to go to the sword principle meeting. Haha, okay. The last expert has been determined. Swordsman. Spirit Lord, go and tell him right now. Yes, my Marquis. Spirit Lord responded, and then left. In the secret chamber of the Lord Mansion in the Blood Sword territory, Jian Wushuang and his slaughter doppelganger were sitting cross-legged and absorbed in meditation. He had been meditating for 3 months. Just at that moment, a surge of overwhelming slaughter origin was flowing in Slaughter Doppelganger, condensing a new mark of slaughter origin on his arm. Now his slaughter doppelganger had 5 marks of slaughter origin. Jian Wushuang could not help sighing about it. The 6-story pagoda's slaughter restriction is amazing. With the help of the slaughter restriction, Slaughter Doppelganger comprehended the slaughter origin faster and condensed the 5th slaughter origin mark within 3 months. At the same time, my true self condensed the 5th world origin mark by using the world scroll. Jian Wushuang and Slaughter Doppelganger condensed 5 origin marks each. Now he had 10 marks total. Jian Wushuang had condensed 4 world origin marks and 1 slaughter origin mark. 3 months later, the total slaughter origin marks was equal to that of the world origin marks. It was all due to the 6-story pagoda, as treasures that were helpful in the comprehension of the origin. The 6-story pagoda was more wonderful than the world scroll. The 6-story pagoda had 6 restrictions, but he was only able to decode the first restriction. 5 world origin marks and 5 slaughter origin marks. Although 2 types of marks can't release power at the same time, my strength has greatly improved from 3 months ago, Jian Wushuang thought with a faint smile. Just at that moment, Lord! Bing Hu called from outside the secret chamber. Jian Wushuang used his mind. Then his slaughter doppelganger instantly merged into his true self, and 5 marks were seen on each arm. Afterward, he stood up, walked toward the door, and opened it to find Bing Hu respectfully waiting outside. My lord, Spirit Lord came and said he has an urgent matter for you. Bing Hu said, Oh. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, and then went toward the main hall. Spirit Lord, Jian Wushuang said upon seeing his guest. Haha, swordsman. Spirit Lord greeted the young man warmly. They each sat beside a long, narrow table. Then, maids came to serve them some good wine and delicious cuisine. Spirit Lord, because you've come here personally, I wonder what has happened. Jian Wushuang was quite curious. Spirit Lord had a high status. If it was regarding an ordinary matter, Spirit Lord could ask an underling to send a message to him. But seeing that Spirit Lord had come personally, it had to be a great matter. I need to tell you something, Spirit Lord said. Swordsman, have you heard about Sword-suppression Valley? Spirit Lord asked. Sword-suppression Valley? Jian Wushuang shook his head. Since he was a newcomer, there were many things that he knew little about in the divine land. Swordsman, have you heard of the sword ancestor? Spirit Lord asked again. Jian Wushuang was a bit surprised and subconsciously held his cup of wine tightly. I've not only heard about him, but actually, I'm the descendant of the sword ancestor. Jian Wushuang did not know why Spirit Lord had suddenly mentioned the sword ancestor, so he just tried to appear calm. I've heard some news about the sword ancestor, and I only know that he was a super expert in the divine land, Jian Wushuang said with a casual smile. Yep, you're right. The sword ancestor was a real super expert. Spirit Lord sighed. Now, the three ancestors are known as the supreme experts in the vast divine land, but thousands of years ago, there were four ancestors. The sword ancestor was one of the four ancestors. The reason for his death is still unknown. After he died, the bloodline of the sword ancestor declined and soon disappeared from the divine land. Then, what's the relationship between Sword-suppression Valley and the sword ancestor? Jian Wushuang held his cup of wine and sipped it with a look of indifference. Spirit Lord continued. The sword ancestor was known as the ancestor of the sword principle. It's said that he had awakened 6 first-grade sword souls and was the first sword principle expert in the divine land. He had a marvelous magic weapon, the heart-killing sword. The heart-killing sword. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. He knew the best sword skill that the sword ancestor had created was called the heart-killing sword technique. He had kept all its 9 moves in mind, but he was only able to display the second move. But he had never heard of the heart-killing sword. The heart-killing sword is the first magic weapon of the sword principle. It's so powerful that it could easily kill a marquis just by using its own sword essence. Ever since the sword ancestor died, his corpse and treasures have become a mystery. No one knows where they are. He only left the heart-killing sword in Sword-suppression Valley, and his personal disciple, Su Ming, has been guarding there, Spirit Lord said. Jian Wushuang was shocked. Su Ming, the sword ancestor's personal disciple, Jian Wushuang asked as he looked at Spirit Lord. Right. Spirit Lord nodded with a smile. Thousands of years ago, sword ancestor traveled around the divine land, and no one was able to match him. Su Ming was one of his personal disciples, and also the most excellent one. Now, Master Su Ming is one of the 9 sovereigns in the divine land. Upon hearing that, Jian Wushuang was no longer able to remain calm. Chapter 476, A Trip to Sword-suppression Valley. Chapter 476, A Trip to Sword-suppression Valley. Su Ming is one of the 9 sovereigns and a personal disciple of the sword ancestor. After the sword ancestor died, the bloodline of the sword ancestor collapsed. Countless experts, including the sword ancestor's personal disciples and 7 sword emperors, were killed. If Su Ming really is the sword ancestor's personal disciple, how can it be impossible that he has survived? Unless Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes and thought of one possibility. When he was in the ancestor's land, Mu Shan mentioned a traitor of the bloodline of the sword ancestor. Mu Shan said the traitor memorized all the 9 moves of the heart-killing sword technique. Although Mu Shan casually talked about it, Jian Wushuang still kept that in mind. Now the young man started wondering if Su Ming was the traitor. Spirit Lord did not know what Jian Wushuang was thinking about and continued speaking. As the first magic weapon of the sword principle, the heart-killing sword is extremely powerful. Except for the sword ancestor, no one is able to control it. What's more, the heart-killing sword is a sword of killing with a mighty killing intent. Master Su Ming could only suppress it in Sword-suppression Valley. By the way, that's why the valley has such a name. The heart-killing sword usually remains quiet, but it shakes violently every 100 years. Even Sir Su Ming is unable to suppress it. However, when its sword essence sweeps out and thousands of swords salute, it will be a precious opportunity for any sword principle warrior. Thousands of swords salute. Jian Wushuang asked in surprise. Sir Su Ming is broad-minded. He will invite many sword principle experts to Sword-suppression Valley before the heart-killing sword shakes violently. This time, Sir Su Ming also invites sword principle experts to this meeting. Spirit Lord said, "Our Marquis is not a sword principle warrior, but as a Marquis, he has also received the invitation." Master Su Ming asked our Marquis to recommend 3 sword principal experts. Hunjian Lord and Tanming Lord are on the list. And as for the last one, I recommended you to our Marquis. Jian Wushuang finally understood why Spirit Lord had come here. Swordsman, would you like to go to Sword-suppression Valley? Spirit Lord asked with a smile. Of course I'd like to. Jian Wushuang nodded without hesitation. Spirit Lord was not surprised by his reply. It would be a great opportunity for any sword principal warrior to watch the heart-killing sword shake and see thousands of swords salute. No one would refuse it. However, Spirit Lord did not know that the main reason Jian Wushuang accepted the invitation was that the heart-killing sword was the sword ancestor's magic weapon, and that he was a descendant of the bloodline of the sword ancestor. In that case, you can make some preparations and then go with me, Spirit Lord said. Jian Wushuang nodded, called Binghua to come in, and gave him some orders. Then he left with Spirit Lord. After traveling for a short while, they found themselves in front of a magnificent palace. The moment Jian Wushuang stepped into it, he saw a young man in a long silver robe whose eyes sparkled with magic. Marquis, both Spirit Lord and Jian Wushuang simultaneously addressed the young man. The silver-robed young man looked at Jian Wushuang and asked, "Are you swordsman? Spirit Lord often talks about you. Our camp has many lords, but a Saint Realm expert can actually become a lord, and you're the only one." Spirit Lord has overestimated me, Jian Wushuang replied with modesty. Marquis Piaoxue did not respond to this, but simply waved his hands while saying, "Sit down, please." Jian Wushuang sat by a long, narrow table and immediately greeted the 2 lords beside him, Hunjian Lord, Tianming Lord. In a polite manner, Hujian Lord and Tianming Lord, who had been awaiting his arrival, looked over at him and replied in succession, "Blood Sword Lord." Then Marquis Piaoxue spoke again. "You should have heard about this already. Master Su Ming sent me the invitation personally, so I don't dare to take it lightly. The 3 of you are the strongest sword principal experts in our camp, so don't make me lose face." "We'll do our best," Jian Wushuang and the other 2 lords responded. "All right." Marquis Piaoxue nodded, took out a token, and gave it to Hunjian Lord. "In half a month, Sword-suppression Valley will open. You should set out as soon as possible." Jian Wushuang and the other 2 lords looked at each other, bowed, and left. After they left the palace, the 3 lords got together. "Hunjian Lord, you have been there before. Tell us more about Sword-suppression Valley," Tianming Lord said. Hunjian Lord had visited Sword-suppression Valley the last time it opened. "It will take us several days to get there. Let's talk about it on the road," Hunjian Lord replied with a smile. Then the 3 of them headed for Sword-suppression Valley. The reopening of Sword-suppression Valley provided a great opportunity for numerous sword principal experts in the Divine Land. Therefore, it also attracted the attention of other sword principal experts. 72 marquises all received the invitations from Master Su Ming, who was one of the 9 sovereigns. No one dared to refuse him. So each of the marquises recommended their 3 most excellent sword principal experts. Besides them, many solitary sword principal experts who were not under the control of the marquises, but were famous for sword principal, also received invitations. At that moment, a figure stood on an unknown mountain, which was outside of the territories that the 72 marquises controlled. He had a long sword on his back, having silver-white hair and a mustache. He looked as if he had experienced many vicissitudes of life. His deep eyes seemed to contain an endless void. He sat with his legs crossed as he drank. Swish, 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 swish. The sound of wind breaking resounded. Instantly, a dozen figures appeared around the white-haired man. Those figures, all were lords with mighty auras. They were led by a muscular elder, a superior lord. The leader looked at the white-haired man with a flicker of killing intent in his eyes. Jin Nantian, you won't escape this time. Chapter 477, The Barrier. Chapter 477, The Barrier. Escape. The white-haired man, who casually sat drinking, raised his head, and his thoughtful dark eyes fell on the muscular elder. He continued, I never did anything like that. Since that's the case, I'll be sending you to hell. The elder roared and billowed forward like flowing smoke. The men with the elder started attacking as well. At this moment, as the white-haired man finally stood up, a sliver of light shot out. At the same time, he drew his long sword, and an immense sword essence immediately began to flow. A Dao weapon. Seeing the weapon the man held, the elder and the nearby lords looked greedy. They began fighting instantly. A fierce battle broke out in the blink of an eye. However, it only took a moment for the battle to be settled. On the hill, the white-haired man sheathed his sword and took out his wine again. Standing still, he looked up into the boundless sky, emotionless. Around him lay piles of bodies. The elder, a superior lord, was among them as well. It has been nearly 5 years. Did he achieve his goal of exterminating Holy Emperor Palace? The white-haired man murmured. At this moment, while thinking about this person he spoke of, he finally began to smile. Sword-suppression Valley, located among an unbroken string of mountains, was famous for suppressing the heart-killing sword. Usually, the valley was quiet, but with the 100-year event drawing near, the valley had recently become crowded. At the edge of the valley, there was a towering group of palaces. Naturally, this was where Su Ming, one of the 9 sovereigns, lived. In one of the palaces, a woman's voice was heard. Your Highness, the news from the guards says that a lot of warriors have gathered outside the valley, a purple-clothed woman said respectfully. She was talking to the handsome man in front of her. The man was so good-looking that many ladies would feel ashamed when looking at him. With his eminent status and overwhelming power, he was definitely a prominent figure. He was Su Ming, a man who was second only to the 3 ancestors and a personal disciple of the sword ancestor. Tell them to open the array and let the experts in. Make sure they are well received, Su Ming ordered, with a voice that was both attractive and stunning. Understood, Your Highness. The purple-clothed woman nodded. She took her eyes, which were filled with fervor and worship, off the man and left. Su Ming was left alone. He stood in silence with his hands behind him, his eyes fixed on a painting at the top of the palace. The painting was of an old man standing on a peak, while holding a long sword in his hand. The old man was looking down over everything with sharp eyes, as if he stood above the whole world. Old man! Su Ming stared at the elder in the painting. His face twitched, and his eyes filled with hatred. It was really malicious of you to leave a fatal flaw in the heart-killing sword. However, I was lucky, so that trick didn't kill me. I guess that move is the last trump card of the heart-killing sword, right? Wait and see. Before long, I will take control of the heart-killing sword and replace you. Then I will be the new sword ancestor. Buzz. Suddenly, a wide channel appeared on the array in front of the warriors that had gathered at the valley entrance, and several people, led by the purple-clothed woman, walked out. So sorry to keep you waiting. Now, please come over here and show me your Marquise token, said the woman. Following those words, the warriors formed a line and walked forward. Some of them had won some fame, but they all remained discreet and obedient when in the Sword-suppression Valley. After all, they were in a place ruled by Su Ming, one of the 9 sovereigns. Su Ming was powerful and had a good reputation. He did not have to invite the experts to his valley and share the rare opportunity involving the heart-killing sword's awakening with them, but he did. He even held a sword principal meeting for all the experts. Among the experts who were walking towards the woman one after another, Jian Wushuang, Hunjian Lord, and Tianming Lord were also waiting in line. While they were waiting, they noticed that not everyone was allowed to enter the valley. The conditions to enter the valley included an invitation or one of the 72 Marques's tokens, as well as one's own level of power. At the entry stood a golden puppet fighter, and the experts had to defeat the puppet to enter the valley. This was something like a test for entering the valley. In fact, everyone who had made their way to the valley was excellent in sword principle and should be able to pass this test. Otherwise, they would only embarrass themselves. This was also the reason why Marquis Piaoxue had chosen the 3 quotas with caution. No matter how many opportunities the chosen ones could get, he had to be sure they were good enough to at least get into the valley. Soon it was Jian Wushuang's and the 2 lords' turn. We're the underlings of Marquis Piaoxue, and these are our tokens. Hunjian Lord handed the 3 tokens to the purple-clothed woman. Fine, then please have a try. The woman nodded to them and pointed at the puppet. Jian Wushuang and the lords exchanged a glance. Hunjian Lord was the first one to take his turn, and he quickly found himself in a fierce battle with the puppet. When fighting with the puppet, the realm, cultivation, power, or comprehension in origin would not matter, only one's achievement in sword principle. Hunjian Lord effortlessly defeated the puppet with his 2nd-grade sword soul. Then it was Tianming Lord's turn. Though he had not awakened his sword soul yet, he had good achievements in sword principle and had mastered many 1st-grade sword techniques. After exchanging several moves with the puppet, he was able to beat it. Finally, it was Jian Wushuang's turn. Chapter 478, 3 Sword Souls. Chapter 478, 3 Sword Souls. Jian Wushuang planned to use his full strength against the puppet. Buzz. An enormous sword essence surged out as 2 giant sword soul phantoms appeared behind Jian Wushuang. The phantoms were almost 30 meters tall and contained a mighty sword essence. With the power of the sword souls, Jian Wushuang quickly defeated the puppet. The experts in the line were amazed when they saw Jian Wushuang's sword soul phantoms and how he defeated the puppet. Double sword souls, each 30 meters tall. Those are double 1st-grade sword souls. He has double 1st-grade sword souls. He is so talented. The experts discussed in amazement. Seeing Jian Wushuang's sword souls, the purple-clothed woman could not help but nod to herself. The representatives sent by Marquis Piaoxue are indeed powerful. You 3, please go this way. Jian Wushuang, Hunjian Lord, and Tianming Lord immediately followed the path and entered Sword-suppression Valley. As soon as they entered the valley, someone came to guide them. Look, that is where the heart-killing sword is suppressed. Hunjian Lord pointed at a huge mountain in the distance. The mountain was shaped like a volcano, with a huge hole at the center, and the heart-killing sword was placed at the bottom. At his first glance of the mountain, Jian Wushuang felt an obscure sword essence coming from the bottom. The sword essence was like a sleeping dragon. Once it woke up, the world would be shaken. With that, Jian Wushuang also sensed the triple-kill sword on his back start to quiver. Jian Wushuang looked confused and tried his best to calm the sword down by holding the hilt tightly. In the end, he had to put the sword in his interspatial ring. Why is the triple-kill sword so excited? Jian Wushuang pondered. The sword had been with him since long ago when he left Sword Marquis Mansion and ventured to the outside world. It was like his dearest comrade, but he had never seen the sword become so excited before. Yes, so excited that it was as if it was meeting family. The triple kill sword is a token to enter the ancestors' land. It may be related to the heart-killing sword somehow, Jian Wushuang thought. Sir, those are your residences. 3 days from now, the heart-killing sword will wake up. Before that time, please concede to stay here. The attendant led them to a yard with many rooms. The rooms were made especially for the invited experts. Thanks. Hunjian, Lord thanked the attendant. After the attendant left, Jian Wushuang and the lords gathered by a table in the room. Swordsman, Tianming Lord, get yourselves prepared in the next 3 days. We can't miss the rare opportunity of the heart-killing sword's awakening, said Hunjian Lord. Among the three, Hunjian Lord was the only one that had been here before. Hunjian Lord, I've heard that at that time there will be 1,000 sword salute here. What exactly is that like? What kind of opportunity are we looking at? Asked Tianming Lord. Well, after a moment of pondering, Hunjian Lord continued. I don't know how to describe it. It's a unique experience, so you will have to see it for yourself at that time. After hearing your words, I can't wait for the sword principal meeting to begin, Tianming Lord said and smiled. Jian Wushuang showed a faint smile as well. He shared the Lord's feeling. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these last few days, experts from every corner kept rushing to the valley. At this moment, outside the valley, a ragged man with a weather-beaten face walked forward slowly. He had a long sword on his back and looked like he was middle-aged, but his hair was gray. The man arrived at the entrance to the valley. Sir, please show me your invitation, said the purple-clothed woman. I don't have such a thing, the man answered. The woman pulled her face. The surrounding experts' eyes immediately fell on the man. The Sword-suppression valley was not accessible to everyone. Those who were in the valley were either recommended by their marquis or famous throughout the divine land and received an invitation from Su Ming. Without a recommendation or an invitation, one could not enter. So, without an invitation, I can't get in? Asked the man in a flat tone. That's not completely true. The woman shook her head and added, Lord Su Ming has proclaimed that everyone with high achievements in sword principle will be allowed into the valley on condition that they can prove themselves. The man looked indifferent upon hearing the woman's words, but behind him an overwhelming sword essence shot up, along with 3 towering figures. There were 3 sword soul phantoms standing side by side, and the center one was a first-grade sword soul that was over 30 meters high. On the left and right, the other 2 phantoms guarded the center one. They were over 24 meters tall and were second-grade sword souls. The 3 phantoms were surging with sword essence, enough to shock anyone in the world. He has 3 sword souls. Gosh, who is he? The experts were aghast when they saw this scene. So was the women. How could he have 3 sword souls? The awakening of sword soul depended on one's talent in sword principle. An ordinary expert might awaken one sword soul at best, and in such cases, they would be called a genius. When the sword ancestors' bloodline was at its peak, there had been a few people who had awoken their sword souls over the decades. The people with 2 sword souls had been even fewer. As for those with 3 sword souls, they were monsters. Now, can I get in? The man's voice echoed through the valley. Chapter 479, A Fascinating Blow. Chapter 479, A Fascinating Blow. After a moment of silence, the purple-clothed woman nodded while saying, Since you have awakened 3 sword souls, you are definitely qualified for the sword principal meeting. The woman let the white-haired man pass. That made sense because few among the participants of the meeting had awakened even 1 sword soul, let alone 2. There were only 3 of them with 2 souls, including Jian Wushuang. The white-haired man was the first participant that had 3 sword souls so far. Being such a genius, the man was definitely qualified to join the meeting. While the man was heading towards Sword-suppression Valley, 2 intense gazes landed on him. He is Jian Nantian. Blood Mountain Marquis is looking all over the place for him. Who would think that he would come here? He really has guts. If only I could kill him. The 2 people currently talking were participants of the Sword Principle meeting as well, and both of them were experts in Sword Principle. They stared at the white-haired man intensely, like they were staring at some kind of treasure. It was a beautiful night. Jian Wushuang sat on the bed with his legs crossed. In front of him, the triple kill sword shivered violently and restlessly. 3 days have passed, and it's still the same. Jian Wushuang looked at the sword and shook his head. Right then, a booming sound echoed through the silent night like thunder. Along with the sound, an overwhelming energy also swept over the area. Jian Wushuang raised his head in astonishment. Is a battle taking place here? He immediately put the triple kill sword back into his interspatial ring and left the room. Hunjian Lord exited his room as well. What's going on? Is there someone who dares to make trouble here? We're in Sword-suppression Valley, a place ruled by Su Ming, aren't we? Let's go and find out. Jian Wushuang, Hunjian Lord, and Tianming Lord rushed out and headed towards the sound. The boom had alarmed everyone in the valley, and a lot of experts had exited their rooms and moved towards the area. They could see 3 people standing side by side on a roof with their strong aura radiating outwards. The air surrounding them was filled with killing intent. Among the 3, 2 were superior lords, and the last was an advanced lord. Opposite the lords was a man with an ethereal aura, his white hair fluttering with the wind, and his hand behind his back. His long shadow under the moon gave him the appearance of a towering figure. He is. When Jian Wushuang caught the sight of the man, his eyes flickered with joy and surprise. Go to hell! Suddenly, the 3 lords shouted and drifted towards the man like ghosts. The moment they moved, the white-haired man acted as well. As he removed his long sword from his back, a surging power erupted from the blade. A Dao weapon? Is that sword a Dao weapon? How could a lord have such a weapon? The power of the sword shocked the experts who were watching, and their gazes were filled with greed. All of the people in the surroundings were experts in sword principle, so that sword, a Dao weapon, drove them crazy. 3 sword soul phantoms rose up when the white-haired man unsheathed his sword. The tallest phantom was 30 meters high and seemed as if it was overlooking everything. The white-haired man made his move. It was a casual blow. A dazzling arc of light ran down the blade, so bright and fascinating that every onlooker was drawn to it. The experts were taken aback by the scene. They were being drawn into what they were seeing. Even the 3 lords who were going to attack the man were distracted by the fascinating blow. Before they could come back to their senses, the sword slashed their throats at an amazing speed. PSSSH, PSSSH, PSSSH. With 3 sounds of a sword slashing flesh, the 3 lords stopped moving, frozen with horrified looks on their faces. The white-haired man resheathed his sword. The 3 lords' dead bodies fell backward to the ground once the sword was returned to its sheath. Horror, shock, those were the onlookers feeling. This man killed 2 superior lords and 1 advanced lord with 1 strike. How powerful! Is he a marquis? His attack was so stunning yet so terrifying. Everyone was filled with amazement. This guy, Hunjian Lord and Tianming Lord, widened their eyes. However, after seeing how the man killed those 3 guys, Jian Wushuang touched his nose with an odd look on his face. Boom! Suddenly, several figures with powerful auras approached the white-haired man, and the leading person was the purple-clothed woman who had guided them into the valley. The woman had an unhappy expression on her face when she saw the dead bodies on the ground. "Sir, you showed no respect to my lord by killing his guests under his eyes," the women scolded. The onlookers immediately looked toward the man. The man fetched out a bottle of wine, took a seat on the roof, and started drinking. He showed no emotion to the woman's words as he replied, "They wanted to kill me, so I killed them." His words were flat and indifferent, but stunned the woman. The onlookers put on a quaint face when they heard his words. Killing at will was not allowed in the valley. However, if it was a self-defense, it could be forgiven. After all, no one would just watch his opponents kill him without doing anything. Everyone present had seen the three lords try to kill the man, and how the man defended himself by killing them. Chapter 480, Father and Son. Chapter 480, Father and Son. The purple-clothed woman stared at the white-haired man for a long time before saying, "Sir, if I'm not mistaken, you are the famous Jian Nantian, aren't you?" "He is Jian Nantian." The name caused an uproar among the experts. "This is beyond my expectations. I heard that he killed all three of Blood Mountain Marquis' sworn brothers and enraged him. The Lord is looking all over the place for him." "I heard that too. What's more, the Lord also said that whoever brings him Jian Nanshan's head will be given a Dao weapon." No wonder the three dead lords had wanted to kill him. They were after the reward, and maybe Jian Nanshan's longsword as well, since it's also a Dao weapon. That's to say, killing him can earn us 2 Dao weapons. Well, I really admire his courage. He has enraged one of the top 2 marquis, but he still dares to participate in this public meeting. If I were him, I would hide somewhere or simply leave the divine land and become a local lord in the outside world. Discussions were heard continuously, mixed with wondering words. Many people at present had heard of Jian Nantian before. Those who had not finally known about him more or less from the discussion, when they learned that they could gain 2 Dao weapons by killing Jian Nantian, their eyes betrayed their frenzied desire to kill him. "Father!" Jian Wushuang looked at the white-haired man in surprise. The man was none other than his father, Jian Nantian. It had been 5 years since he last saw his father. Now, they had finally met again. However, Jian Nantian kept drinking in silence and did not seem to care about the discussions all these people were having on him. The purple-clothed woman was not annoyed at the man's cold manner, and said with a smile, "Since you were forced to do so, I will have to let it go then." She looked around and continued, "Ladies and gentlemen, as all of you were invited here as my lord's guests, so be a guest. Whoever makes trouble during the sword principal meeting will be my lord's enemy." The words echoed through the valley and intimidated the experts, forcing them to calm down. They finally realized that they were at a place ruled by Su Ming, and anything that crossed the line would be regarded as a challenge against the Lord's authority. Despite this, not everyone could ignore the temptation of 2 Dao weapons. For the sake of Su Ming, they would put the desire aside until the meeting was over, but after that, they would not hesitate to kill Jian Nantian. Well, the sword principal meeting will begin tomorrow, so everyone should go back and rest well. Having said this, the woman was the first one to leave with her group. The experts headed back as well. "Let's go back too," Han Jian Lord said to Jian Wushuang. "Sorry, you go first. I have something to do here," Jian Wushuang replied. Han Jian Lord shot Jian Wushuang a surprised glance, but he didn't say anything more and left with Tianming Lord. Soon, the valley was quiet again. a bright moon, was high in the sky, causing the ground to be slightly illuminated by the moonlight. Under the moon, Jian Nantian sat alone on the roof, drinking. His shadow was long and his hair was waving with the wind, giving him an ethereal look. A figure approached him from behind. Jian Nantian looked back and saw Jian Wushuang. The emotionless man finally showed a smile. "Father," Jian Wushuang called in a soft voice. "Come here, take a seat." Jian Nantian threw the wine to Jian Wushuang and added, "Have a drink with me." Jian Wushuang caught the wine and sat beside his father. "You've grown a lot during the last few years." Jian Nantian stared at Jian Wushuang with a grin. "Not as much as you have, Father," Jian Wushuang said and smiled. He knew very well that even though he had made good progress and was considered an expert in the divine land, he still could not hold a candle to his father. At least, he could not display an attack as fascinating as the one his father had just shown. "Currently, without external forces, I can battle an advanced lord, but there is a long way to go before I can kill a superior lord and 2 advanced lords with 1 strike, as father has done," Jian Wushuang thought. "I thought it would be 10 years before I saw you again, but it's only been less than half of that, hasn't it?" said Jian Nantian. "Yes, father," Jian Wushuang answered and smiled. "Holy Emperor Palace has been destroyed, right?" his father asked. "Yes, it was destroyed 3 years ago," Jian Wushuang answered. "Really?" Jian Nantian raised his brows. "That means it only took you 2 years to destroy it after I left. Well done, son. Much sooner than I had expected." "Not bad." Jian Wushuang grinned. The father and the son chatted while drinking under the moon. When in front of strangers, Jian Wushuang was always aloof and would only be more sociable to his friends. However, at this moment, with his father, he was unrestrained and behaved like a child. As for his father, Jian Nantian, who took nothing hard except his sword, he regarded Jian Wushuang as being more important than himself and his sword. "Father, why did they say that you offended Marquis Xiefeng?" Jian Wushuang suddenly changed the topic. "Marquis Xiefeng?" Jian Nantian answered while smiling. "There is no need to be afraid of him. We should pay more attention to Su Ming." "Su Ming?" Jian Wushuang looked grave. "Is he really the person who betrayed the sword ancestor?" Chapter 481. The Sword Principal Meeting begins. Chapter 481. The Sword Principal Meeting begins. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian spent the night talking under the moonlight. It was Jian Wushuang's most heart-warming night in the recent years. The next day, the valley was already in an uproar at first light. The experts walked out of their rooms and hurried towards the mountain where the heart-killing sword had been placed. A short while later, a large group of experts had gathered in front of the mountain. Naturally, Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian were among them. Besides these experts, there were 2 other people present that attracted everyone's attention. One of them was a stout man with tanned skin, his body surrounded by a thunderbolt. The other one was a thin and elegant young man with a folding fan in his hand. Their overbearing aura shocked many experts on the spot and instantly revealed their identity as marquises. They are Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu. Neither of them is an expert in sword principle. What are they doing here? They obviously came here for Jian Nantian. The onlookers were discussing the current situation in a low voice. With his eyes squinted, Jian Wushuang looked at the 2 marquises and nodded. There were both strong and weak marquises. Most of the well-acknowledged among the 72 marquis were in the normal 7-cloud realm, and some of them did not even possess a Dao weapon. Marquis Piaoxue and Marquis Songyue were part of the latter. They wanted to kill Jian Nantian, and by doing so they could gain 2 Dao weapons. Many experts and marquises were here for the same reason. The 2 marquises had made their way to the valley the very same night after they heard the news. However, though they had been in the valley, for fear of annoying Su Ming, they had to wait until Jian Nantian left the valley to kill him. Since these 2 marquises rushed here the moment they heard the news, Marquis Xiefeng must have heard the news as well, Jian Wushuang thought while frowning. Right then, with a group of attendants surrounding him, a white-robed man came down. He was a handsome man with a wicked smile on his face and a compelling manner. The experts could not help but be drawn to the man as their eyes fixated on him. Even Jian Wushuang was impressed and shot the man a glance. Is he Su Ming? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. From the chat with his father last night, he had learned that Su Ming was the traitor of Sword Ancestors' bloodline and had something to do with the fall of the bloodline. Yet, only the top experts of the Divine Land knew about it. The common people still thought of Su Ming as the Sword Ancestors' personal disciple. Everyone's eyes turned towards Su Ming when he came out, everyone except for Jian Nantian. He did not spare Su Ming a glance from the very beginning. He stood straight, with his eyes closed, as if he was asleep and had no idea of Su Ming's arrival. For him, only his sword and Jian Wushuang deserved his attention. Your Excellency, I pay my respects to Your Excellency. The experts saluted Su Ming one after another, and even Marquis, Wanlei, and Marquis Nanyu paid their respect with a bow. Ladies and gentlemen, don't be so courteous. Su Ming spoke in a soft and fascinating voice. The experts straightened their backs. Wanlei, Nanyu, I didn't expect that you would come here. Su Ming looked toward the marquises with a smile. We'd love to see how powerful the heart-killing sword is, said Marquis Wanlei. Really? Su Ming sneered and continued, I reckon you're here for something else. Upon hearing this, Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu exchanged an embarrassed look. All right, I don't care what you do when you're outside, but you'd better behave yourselves in Sword-suppression Valley, said Su Ming. Of course we will. Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu nodded heavily, not daring to say one more word. After all, they were just in the 7-cloud realm and at the bottom of 72 Marquis, so they had to show their respect, even to Marquis Xiefeng, let alone Su Ming, one of 9 sovereigns. They knew very well how powerful and terrifying Su Ming was. Though this sovereign looked gentle and elegant for the moment, he was known as Sword Demon among the top experts in the Divine Land. His personality became quite chilling when it was time to kill. A half-day from now, the heart-killing sword will begin to wake up. Don't miss this rare opportunity. After saying this, Su Ming shut his mouth. However, the crowd got into a heated discussion. Swordsman Tianming Lord, look, there are secret chambers at the foot of the mountain, said Hunjian Lord. Secret chambers? Jian Wushuang followed the Lord's line of sight and spotted the chambers. Half a day from now, the heart-killing sword will begin to awaken, erupting with sword essence. The essence itself is an opportunity, and the nearer we are to the sword, the better our benefit will be. Since there are a total of 100 secret chambers that are the closest to the sword, we'll definitely benefit greatly if we can enter one of them. Are there only 100 chambers? Tianming Lord frowned and asked. There were hundreds of experts here, and 100 chambers were definitely not enough. Are you really thinking that every one of us will be able to occupy a chamber? Hunjian Lord laughed and continued. Let me tell you this, 100 is more than enough. At the previous meetings, less than 30 people were able to make their way into the chambers. Why? Tianming Lord was confused. You'll know soon. Han Jian, Lord put on a mysterious smile. Chapter 482, The Impact of the Sword Essence. Chapter 482, The Impact of the Sword Essence. A half-day had passed while the experts waited impatiently. The hole in the mountain where the heart-killing sword was placed finally began shaking. It's beginning. All the experts concentrated on the hole. Buzz, the shrill echo of a sword resounded throughout the area as a red light covered the sky above the hole. At the center of the light, a matchless magic weapon was slowly rising into the air. Everyone at the scene held their breath while staring at the rising weapon with intent. The heart-killing sword, the sword ancestor's weapon, as well as the number 1 magic weapon in sword principle. Is this the heart-killing sword? Jian Wushuang stared at the floating longsword in the red light, his eyes filled with amazement. The sword was completely red and radiated a chilling light. Even at first glance, people could tell it was a world-shaking sword of killing. However, that was not what startled Jian Wushuang. Instead, it was because the sword was so similar to his triple-kill sword. Although it was different in color and size, the two swords were the same in every other way, including the hilt and the mysterious crack on its blade. The number 1 magic weapon in sword principle, the experts called out in admiration, and their eyes were burning with greed. Every expert in sword principle had a great desire to possess this sword, but none of them had been able to in the past 1,000 years since Sword Ancestor's death because the sword was too powerful to control. Suddenly, the floating sword quivered, and another piercing sound echoed, seeming to reach the heavens. A formidable sword essence was unleashed, so overwhelming that wherever it passed, the sky became dark and the void began to ripple. The whole world seemed to be filled with a thrilling atmosphere. Here it comes. As the experts gazed at the sword essence that was rushing towards them at a visible speed, their eyes narrowed and they prepared themselves. Nonetheless, they looked pale after the sword essence swept over them, and some of them even lost their senses. Very few could face the impact with ease. Now, I finally understood what you meant. Tianming, Lord cast Han Jian, Lord and I. He looked terrible. Though his sword soul phantom had appeared, he could barely block the sword essence with its power. The Lord struggled to march forward, but the closer they moved towards the heart-killing sword, the more they were impacted. They completely believed that the sword essence around the secret chambers had to be unbearably powerful. Among the experts, quite a few could still move to the chambers under the impact. Right now, it's just the sword essence erupting. Soon, there will be thousands of swords saluting the heart-killing sword. Before that happens, we need to get as near to the sword as we can, so that we get the most out of this opportunity, Han Jian Lord said in a low voice. Let's go. With a shout, the Lord managed to march 1 step forward. Not just him. The other experts also tried their best to get closer to the heart-killing sword. However, as the strength of the sword essence increased, their path forward became even harder. Swish! A flowing light shot across the sky at amazing speed and approached the foot of the mountain in an instant as if he was not affected by the sword essence at all. He picked a chamber and walked in. The experts were not surprised to see this because the flowing light was no other than Su Ming. As one of the 9 sovereigns, Su Ming was called Sword Demon and had reached great heights in sword principle. It was believed that he was only second to Sword Ancestor at his peak, so it was easy for him to bear the impact from the sword essence. On the contrary, the others were in the middle of a difficult struggle. For example, when Jian Wushuang first experienced the impact, he could barely take it. That is, until he released his 2 sword soul phantoms to help him. Jian Wushuang moved firmly, step by step. Though the impact slowly grew more powerful, he managed to make it to the mountain quickly enough with the help of his double sword souls. Not bad. Suddenly, he heard a soft voice from beside him. He followed the voice and saw his father, Jian Nantian, staring at him in front of a chamber. Jian Wushuang shrugged before walking into one of the chambers. He had accomplished something that many other experts wanted to do as well. Being closer to the heart-killing sword meant the chambers would provide the best benefits. However, only a dozen people made their way to the chambers despite everyone who was struggling hard, and those who succeeded were real geniuses in sword principle. As for Hunjian Lord and Tianming Lord, they had gained a lot in sword principle, but they were still too weak to make it to the chambers. Looks like we have to stop here. Hunjian Lord's face turned red. He was unwilling to give up, but he couldn't move forward even one more step, let alone crossing the 30 meters that separated him and the chambers. He was exhausted and at his limit. Swordsman was able to enter a chamber. I really envy him. Hunjian Lord looked towards the chambers with an envious expression. He was not the only one to have such a feeling. Those who failed to approach the chamber all felt the same. After all, only inside one of the chambers could they experience the 1,000-sword salute in the most profound way. Under the red-colored patch of sky, a matchless sword chi was being released from the blade of the heart-killing sword, which was still surging with an overbearing sword essence. At this moment, Jian Wushuang, Jian Nantian, and Su Ming, as well as the others in the chambers, and those who were not, all raised their head. Chapter 4, 83, 1,000 Sword Salute. Chapter 4, 83, 1,000 Sword Salute. Within the secret chamber, Jian Wushuang raised his head and stared fixedly at the scarlet longsword, which was beneath the blood river. The upper stone walls of the chamber were made up of completely transparent gems, which thus allowed him to clearly see everything behind them. The scarlet longsword, under the gaze of everyone present, suddenly emitted the matchless sword chi of the sword ancestor. This unsurpassed sword chi quickly ran through all of heaven and earth. The scarlet longsword's blood-red body became ever more dazzling, causing it to appear like the emperor among swords as it suspended in the air. In Sword-suppression Valley was gathered a large number of sword principle experts, among whom some carried their long swords on their backs, while others kept their long swords in their interspatial rings. But following the appearance of the sword chi, clang, 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 within the valley, every sword which was a second-grade magic weapon or better began to point toward the heart-killing sword, regardless of whether they were carried on the experts' backs or kept in interspatial rings. Thousands upon thousands of weapons glowed in all shades of brilliant colors and bowed respectfully toward the emperor among swords as if they were its subjects. In turn, it let out a shrilling sword echo to indicate its enjoyment of the 1,000-sword salute. The 1,000-sword salute. The crowd of sword principle experts expressed their inner shock at the sight of this scene. Even Jian Wushuang, who was in the secret chamber, was equally shocked when he saw his triple-kill sword bowing toward the heart-killing sword. This was a 1,000-sword salute indeed. The emperor among swords had received the adulation of thousands upon thousands of swords. Also, a peculiar wave had begun to spread as the salute started. The deeply mysterious wave contained a matchless sword essence of killing. Right at this moment, everyone within the valley seemed to hear a roar coming from the heart-killing sword. Kill! Kill everyone in the world who's disloyal. Kill! Kill everyone in the world who's unfilial. Kill! Kill everyone in the world who's unrighteous. Every word of this roar was powerfully clangorous, broadly imposing, and universally shocking. Every word contained profound mystery as it diffused throughout. The valley turned gravely silent. The sword principle experts in the valley hurriedly closed their eyes and seized this rare opportunity. Jian Wushuang too closed his eyes. He had been unable to control his triple kill sword, which remained in a reverent pose, and thus he could only use his finger as a sword as he began to practice within the secret chamber. He exerted a strike which was extremely ordinary and dull. It did not cause even the slightest of waves within the chamber. Jian Wushuang withdrew his finger, but quickly exerted another strike. Every subsequent strike he exerted was equally insipid. However, with every strike, the sword light generated became more beautiful in a poignant sense. After 31 successive strikes, he exerted his 32nd. This particular strike was as dull and ordinary as the rest, but a dazzling arc light appeared in the direction of the sword light it generated. The arc light was not only bright and dazzling, but also incomparably beautiful in a poignant sense. So beautiful that it was enchanting. Upon close observation, it was not difficult to see that it was the same strike which Jian Nantian had exerted the previous night, and its name was simply Enchant. It was the third move of the heart-killing sword technique, Enchant. Jian Wushuang had never gained understanding of this move before, but now mastered it with only a little practice, thanks to the opportunity provided by the 1,000-sword salute. At the same time, he gained not only swordsmanship, but also an understanding of the slaughter origin. The unsurpassed sword chi of killing from the heart-killing sword had caused him to involuntarily fall into an epiphany, which immediately provided him with a whole new understanding of the slaughter origin. All of a sudden, he was able to understand many of the riddles surrounding the first restriction of the six-story pagoda. He remained with his eyes closed, but on his right arm, which originally had only 5 slaughter origin marks, quickly formed a 6th from the large amount of slaughter origin that gathered on his arm as a result of the understanding he gained from the epiphany. The formation of the 6th mark was not the end, for a 7th began to form as well. It took shape in only a short time. The 7th origin mark. It ought to be known that the origin understandings which the marks represented were equivalent to the clouds of the Cloud Realm experts, except that they were not as powerful as the latter. This 7th mark meant that once Jian Wushuang attained the Cloud Realm, he would become a being of the 7 Cloud Realm, which was the level of the average Marquis. Despite gaining understanding of the 3rd move of the heart-killing sword technique and having the 7th mark of the slaughter origin formed on his arm, he remained in a state of epiphany. Now, it was Jian Wushuang's sword soul that transformed. Originally, 2 firm and tough sword souls rested quietly within his sea of consciousness. At present, however, they were beginning to shake violently, and their volumes sharply expanded together with the frenzied sweeping across of obscure streams of sword essence. Shortly after, traces of sword soul energy surged out from them, and a 3rd sword soul gradually formed within the sea of consciousness. At the same time, 3 majestic sword soul phantoms appeared behind Jian Wushuang. Each of them was nearly 100 feet tall and emitted a terrifying sword essence. 3 sword souls, and they were all 1st grade. Jian Wushuang only came round from his epiphany after the 3rd sword soul had completely taken shape. 3 sword souls. He revealed a faint smile on his face when he felt the 3 sword souls within his sea of consciousness and the 3 sword soul phantoms behind him. The power of the sword souls was abnormally profound and exceedingly rare. To be able to awaken 3 sword souls at the same time was something few and far between throughout the entire divine land. For instance, Jian Wushuang had seen only his father doing so during the sword principle meeting. However, of the 3 sword souls awakened by his father, only one was 1st grade, while the other 2 were 2nd grade. But he was different. He had awakened 3 first-grade sword souls. Something's not right. His complexion suddenly changed, and he peered toward the 3 sword souls in his sea of consciousness. These 3 sword souls. He furrowed his brows. For some reason, upon seeing the sword souls, he had a false impression that they should not be separate and should instead be a single entity. I feel that these 3 sword souls can be joined into one. An idea arose in his heart. It was an idea which could be considered crazy. However, he could not inhibit it once it flashed across his mind. Joined as one. These 3 sword souls should be joined as one. The heavenly creation skill naturally began to operate in his body as he harbored this idea, in accordance with which the 3 sword souls in his sea of consciousness actually began to slowly amalgamate. Chapter 484. Holy shit, 3 sword souls joined as one. Chapter 484. Holy shit, 3 sword souls joined as one. The deeply mysterious 1,000-sword salute provided a massive opportunity. Many of the sword principle experts in sword-suppression Valley cherished this type of opportunity to the highest degree and were thus meditating in full concentration. Those whose comprehension levels were as high as Jian Wushuang's entered an epiphany in little time. An epiphany was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and the benefits were huge upon going through one. As time passed, the scarlet longsword, which emitted an unsurpassed sword chi of killing beneath its bloody light, finally cooled off. The sword chi of killing vanished. The terrifying sword essence, which had been charging nonstop in all directions, began to dissipate gradually. One after another, the thousands upon thousands of weapons which participated in the salute stopped moving. Even the bloody light which filled the sky began to fade. Finally, the scarlet longsword returned to normal, and with a fierce roar, slowly headed back to its abode at the bottom of the mountain hole. Everything became peaceful again. Within Sword-suppression Valley, everyone opened their eyes, save for a small number of sword principle experts who remained in a state of epiphany. There was a look of pleasant surprise, yet also a little regret in the eyes of those who opened theirs. The pleasant surprise was because they all received huge benefits from the opportunity provided by the deeply mysterious 1,000-sword salute that just passed. Conversely, the regret was because the opportunity lasted way too short for them to enter an epiphany. In any case, the opportunity was over. It's over! Sighing softly, Hunjian Lord turned his eyes toward Tianming, Lord by the side. Right at this moment, a 60 feet tall sword soul phantom appeared behind the ladder. "Congrats, Tianming Lord," he said. "Ha ha." The latter looked pleasantly surprised too. "I'd thought it impossible to awaken a sword soul in this life. It's wonderful that I've finally awakened one, even if it's only 2nd grade." Tianming Lord had indeed awakened a sword soul during the opportunity that just passed. Both of us have benefited considerably, but the people who benefited the most are those who remained in the secret chamber. By being nearest to the heart-killing sword, they felt the most, and thus benefited the most. Hunjian Lord commented. "That's true. I'm jealous of them," Tianming Lord replied praisingly. The sword principle experts who entered an epiphany began to come round one after another, and each of them looked pleasantly surprised beyond compare. Subsequently, some of the dozen or so experts in the secret chamber walked out of said chamber. Within a short while, most of the sword principle experts were gathered together once again. "Where's the swordsman?" There was a look of astonishment on Hunjian Lord's face. All of the sword principle experts, including Su Ming and Jian Nantian, had stepped out of the secret chamber, leaving Jian Wushuang as the only person in there. The benefits he received must be huge. Hunjian Lord could not help remarking. All of a sudden, boom, a voluminous sword essence gushed from one of the secret chambers. Broad, and imposing, it contained a boundless murderous intent as it swept across. The experts gathered in Sword-suppression Valley quickly detected the presence of the sword essence, and immediately looked toward the secret chamber which Jian Wushuang was in. What they saw were 3 towering sword soul phantoms. Every one of them was close to 100 feet tall, and stood side by side like peerless sword masters. The broad and imposing sword essence had originated from their bodies. 3 sword souls. 3 sword souls standing side by side, every one of them majestic in height and first grade. Who was it that awakened 3 first-grade sword souls? The sword principal experts who witnessed this scene were shell-shocked. They had already been shocked when Jian Nantian awakened 3 sword souls previously. However, back then, there was only 1 first-grade sword soul, with the other 2 being second-grade. That was nothing compared to the astoundment of seeing 3 first-grade sword souls. It's the swordsman. They came from the secret chamber. He's in. There was a glimmer in the eyes of both Hanjian Lord and Tianming Lord. To awaken 3 first-grade sword souls was considered an incredible feat in divine land, throughout the history of which only a handful of people had been capable of awakening 3 first-grade souls. 3 first-grade sword souls. As one of the 9 sovereigns, even the lofty Su Ming revealed a hint of amazement on his handsome face. It should be known that, to someone who is called Sword Demon, this had only been the awakening of 3 first-grade sword souls. To awaken 3 first-grade sword souls could be considered monstrous. But if so, the sword ancestor's awakening of 6 first-grade sword souls should be considered monstrously beyond monstrous. It was precisely because the sword ancestor had defied the natural order that he earned his name as the ancestor of the sword principle. Though the appearance of the 3 sword souls had captured everyone's attention, this was but the beginning. The following scene would cause everyone's, including the sword principle experts and Master Su Ming's, hair to stand on their ends. Within the secret chamber, the 3 sword soul phantoms, which had been standing side by side, closed the distance between themselves and began to fuse together. A fusion of sword souls. Impossible. How can sword souls fuse? Many of the sword principle experts were so dumbstruck that their mouths were agape, and their eyes were filled with astonishment. A fusion of sword souls. Since ancient times, there had been countless experts who had awakened souls, and among them had been many talented experts who awakened 2 or 3 souls, while a select number of exceptional geniuses had awakened 4 or even 5. The sword ancestor, who had awakened 6 sword souls, was considered a monster among monsters. However, regardless of how many souls these monsters had awakened, nobody had ever fused several sword souls together. It had never happened or even been rumored to have happened before. Throughout the history of the divine land, various experts had attempted to do so. However, because every awakened soul was unique, they could never be fused together regardless of what the experts tried. Nobody had ever managed to do it. Even the sword ancestor, who awakened 6 sword souls, could not. But now, in the secret chamber, the 3 sword soul phantoms behind Jian Wushuang were fusing together at a speed which allowed the process to be visible. Within Jian Wushuang's sea of consciousness, they had already fused together into one completely. The fusion was complete. Sure enough, the 3 first-grade sword souls had fused completely. In fusing the sword souls, Jian Wushuang had done what nobody in the divine land's history had done before. The crowd of sword principle experts, including Su Ming and Jian Nantian, stared fixedly at the secret chamber. A perfect fusion of 3 first-grade sword souls. Holy shit! A series of cries began to reverberate throughout the valley. Chapter 485. 8,000 sword applause for the most powerful sword soul. Chapter 4, 85. A thousand sword applause for the most powerful sword soul. Holy shit! What a monster! A series of exclamations reverberated in the massive Sword-suppression valley, which was completely stirred up. The fusion of three sword souls was unprecedented in the history of the Divine Land. What was this if not monstrous? In the secret chamber, Jian Wushuang felt somewhat muddled upon becoming aware that he had fused three first-grade sword souls together completely. They're fused. They're fused just like that. Jian Wushuang murmured to himself, his eyes filled with disbelief. He had easily done what nobody else could ever do. It had been nothing more than an idea in his head, which he followed and ultimately succeeded in actualizing on his first attempt. He had done what was impossible for anyone else to do in the simplest, most casual, and most untroubled fashion. It's the heavenly creation skill. After calming down, he finally understood what went on. The biggest difference between him and others was the cultivation method he had mastered. He was an inverse cultivator who cultivated the heavenly creation skill. It was in the blood of inverse cultivators to defy the natural order and go against convention. The heavenly creation skill in his body had involuntarily operated during the fusion of the three sword souls. This was an indication that said skill was inextricably linked to his fusion ability. Jian Wushuang felt at ease once he understood this point. The heavenly creation skill was a heaven-defying cultivation method. Anything that was impossible would be made possible upon becoming related to it. The fused body of the three sword souls was clearly a tad smaller than what Jian Wushuang had imagined in his sea of consciousness. However, it soon began to shake violently and metamorphosis. That's right, it was a metamorphosis. The sword soul in the sea of consciousness was originally transparent, illusionary, and glass-like. However, its color gradually changed. A layer of gold gradually appeared over its transparent parts, like a newborn baby putting on his first set of clothes. The transparent sword soul seemed as if it had put on garments which were warm gold in color. In only a short time, the transparent and illusionary sword soul in the sea of consciousness metamorphosized into a golden sword soul which emitted a boundless radiance. At the same time, the majestic sword soul phantom, which was formed from the three phantoms behind Jian Wushuang, also began to metamorphosis. Like the sword soul in the sea of consciousness, a layer of gold appeared on and gradually covered its entire body. The majestic sword soul phantom gradually solidified and transformed into an impressive golden war god, which body mass greatly expanded. It grew at an astonishing speed from its original stature of close to 100 feet. It exceeded 100 feet in the blink of an eye and still continued to grow rapidly. 110 feet, 120 feet, 150 feet. The golden war god, which was originally already of a towering height, grew nonstop under the horrified looks of the numerous sword principal experts in Sword-suppression Valley. Finally, when it reached 180 feet in height, it gradually stopped growing. 180 feet. A sword soul phantom of 180 feet. A golden sword soul phantom. What on earth is this? Shock and bewilderment. Confused, none of the sword principal experts could believe their eyes. For a sword soul phantom, 100 feet was considered the maximum height even if it was first grade. Furthermore, sword soul phantoms were but spectral images, or in other words, shadows, which were typically monotone. The sight in front of their eyes had utterly defied what was reasonable. A 180 feet tall, golden-colored sword soul phantom was no longer what they imagined a first-grade sword soul to be. It had surpassed the category of a first-grade sword soul. Is it above first grade? Many of the sword principal experts wondered. Its eyes, which had been tightly closed, opened vigorously right at this moment, a streak of boundless sword essence flashing across them. Boom! Gushing from its body was a boundless sword essence, which was a few notches more powerful than the one emitted from the heart-killing sword. This sword essence swept forth with an overwhelming momentum. In a twinkling, it swept onto the bodies of many sword principle experts in the valley. The head-on approach of the gushing sword essence caused the faces of the experts to turn ghastly pale. Some experts even spat blood and hurriedly retreated backward. As it swept through the world, the terrifying sword essence carried an aura of transcendence and intent to outstrip all things of the universe. The next moment, ching, 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 shrilling sword echoes rang out in every corner of the valley. They were made by the weapons in the hands of the sword principle experts. These weapons had merely saluted when they faced the heart-killing sword previously. This time, however, under the attention of the 18 feet tall golden sword Soul Phantom. Clang, 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 clang. Among the thousands of weapons in the valley, those which were magic weapons or better disregarded their owners as they surged out of the interspatial rings toward the sword Soul Phantom. Like a dense cloud of locusts which covered heaven and earth, thousands upon thousands of weapons gleamed in brilliant colors as they encircled the sword Soul Phantom. Subsequently, a supreme sword essence swept forth from the sword Soul Phantom. Shush! Thousands upon thousands of weapons saluted in unison at this very instant, sending shrilling sword echoes into the heavens. These echoes shook the entire world as if they were the voices of immortals. Far away from the divine land, in Jian Wushuang's hometown of the Nanyang continent, inside a cave mansion located within the territory of the Tang dynasty, a middle-aged man in plain gray robes raised his head forcibly at this very moment. He was able to see clearly everything that was happening in the Sword-suppression valley of the divine land through a void, which was hundreds of millions of miles long. 8,000 sword applause for the most powerful sword soul. He's indeed worthy of being the chosen disciple. He has managed to achieve the most powerful sword soul in this kind of place, and at such a young age, it probably won't be difficult for him to attain the most powerful sword principle hereafter. Laughing gently, the middle-aged man flipped his hand, such that an object appeared in it. Astonishingly, it was a gray stone bead, which was as big as a baby's fist. It emitted a peculiar aura. Jian Wushuang would certainly recognize this object with one look. It was exactly the same as the mysterious stone bead in his body, which provided him with the heavenly creation skill. It seems that I have to find an opportunity to pass this to him. Chapter 486. The heart-killing sword submits of its own accord. Chapter 486. The heart-killing sword submits of its own accord. It was a magnificent spectacle in the Sword-suppression valley, where thousands upon thousands of swords cried in unison and shook the heavens. Upon witnessing this scene, all the sword principle experts in the valley were astounded. The present scene was, in fact, a few shades greater than the previous one in which the sword caused 1,000 sword salute. And right at this moment, buzz, a shrilling sword echo abruptly sounded with extreme resonance. As it sounded, it easily drowned out all other noises in the valley. At the same time, the thousands of weapons which encircled the Soul Phantom and had just been crying in unison quickly died down and became silent. Within the entire valley, the only remaining noise was the resonant sword echo. What? Standing among the crowd with his hands on his back, Su Ming, who always had a clear and handsome look, suddenly shifted countenance. Horror, too, appeared on the faces of every sword principle expert as they turned their eyes toward the source of the sword echo. Astonishingly, the sword echo had originated from the deep pit in the mountain, and within that deep pit was only one weapon, which was none other than the heart-killing sword. Swish! A beam of bloody light shot up from the bottom of the pit, instantly triggering a suppressive force from a powerful restriction in the mountainside. Sword-suppression Valley had always been a place intended for the suppression of the heart-killing sword. There was a powerful restriction present in the mountainside where the sword was at. Whenever the sword acted up, the restriction would automatically initiate suppression. But this time, the heart-killing sword lashed fiercely and directly toward the restriction. Its blood-colored sword edge exerted unprecedented power as it viciously stabbed the restriction with irresistible force. For a while, the powerful restriction shook, as if it was on the verge of breaking down. This is bad. As one of the 9 sovereigns, it was surprising that the dignified master Su Ming would let out an exclamation at this very moment. His white garments flapped in the air as he rushed toward the restriction and tried in vain to control the restriction such that it would suppress the heart-killing sword. It was obvious that he had underestimated the power of the heart-killing sword, or, to put it another way, what he underestimated was the sword's determination and eagerness to break the restriction. He had seen the restriction being perforated by the sword before he reached close to it, on which abruptly appeared an extremely hair-like yet fatal opening. Crack! The opening abruptly grew bigger. The restriction would ultimately be ruptured by the heart-killing sword. Swish! After breaking the restriction, the sword let out an excited howl and transformed into a bloody light which instantly shot through the void. Unexpectedly, it headed toward the 180 feet tall golden sword Soul Phantom, joining the other thousands of weapons. In all its demonic and seductive blood color, it appeared in front of the sword Soul Phantom, jumping up and down in tremendous excitement. The sword principal experts around were flabbergasted by the sight of this. From the secret chamber, Jian Wushuang too witnessed the thousand sword applause and saw the heart-killing sword. This heart-killing sword, frowning slightly, a strange feeling popped up in the bottom of his heart, and he then gestured toward the sword. Although the gesture was a subconscious action, what he did not expect was that, in immediate reaction to it, the sword would let an exclamation and was toward him before floating with an unprecedented politeness in front of him. Its posture was like that of a young child in front of his parents. Such good manners. Is this really the heart-killing sword? Jian Wushuang was somewhat baffled. It should be known that the heart-killing sword was the Divine Land's first sword principal magic weapon, and it was also murderous in nature. A murderous magic weapon of its level should be extremely ruthless, brutal, and supercilious, as could be told from the scene of the thousand-sword salute some time ago. But now, it behaved politely in front of him. He slowly reached his hand out and grasped its hilt, to which it showed no resistance, and even became delighted. Shortly after, he began the dripping of blood to bind it to himself. The binding process went through smoothly. In only a moment's time, the binding was complete. Jian Wushuang had, impressively, become the first owner of a murderous sword principal magic weapon in the Divine Land. This is a bit too easy, isn't it? Jian Wushuang muttered in surprise. He knew in his heart that the heart-killing sword had come because of the golden sword's soul he metamorphosized. Shaking his head, he did not think any more about it. As soon as his thoughts changed, the 180 feet tall golden sword Soul Phantom behind him began to slowly dissipate, while the thousands of weapons suspended in the air also receded one after another. Everything became calm once again. The entire Sword-suppression Valley fell into a deathly silence. There remained a trace of consternation in the eyes of the sword principal experts, who could not calm down even as time passed. Everyone's eyes were currently fixated upon the inside of the secret chamber. They were all curious whether the monster who caused everything that just happened had 3 heads and 6 arms. The door of the secret chamber bolted open under the watch of everyone, and a figure in black robes slowly stepped out shortly after. He was not tall in stature and had a youthful face, which was decent-looking much as it absolutely could not compare to Su Ming's in terms of handsomeness. He carried in his hand a scarlet longsword which every expert present recognized. It was none other than the heart-killing sword. Considered to be the ultimate sword of killing by everyone, it nevertheless remained tame and calm in the person's hand. The footsteps of the man as he moved forward were steady, sonorous, and forceful. He only stopped walking when he had reached in front of the crowd of experts. Indeed, the heart-killing sword has recognized him as its owner. The experts gazed with complicated looks at Jian Wushuang. Since the fall of the sword ancestor, the heart-killing sword had never had a second owner. It had thus remained in the Sword-suppression Valley for over 1,000 years, throughout which time there had been many sword principal experts who attempted to subdue it but ended up failing to do so. Su Ming, for instance, had made several attempts but was frustrated each time. The heart-killing sword finally got a new owner, but under the gaze of the experts, the aura on Jian Wushuang's body was impossible to conceal. It was, to everyone's surprise, the aura of a mere Saint Realm expert. A Saint Realm expert. He's only a Saint Realm expert. He not only awakened 3 first-grade sword souls, but more inconceivably fused them perfectly and metamorphosized them into an all-new sword soul, such that even the heart-killing sword would voluntarily submit to him as its owner. To think he's only a Saint Realm expert. The sword principal experts were filled with sourness in their hearts, and many of them looked upon Jian Wushuang with great jealousy. Yes, it was jealousy. Jian Wushuang could sense the incoming envy upon him as well. Little I believe your recognition of me as your owner is a good thing, but it has also brought me huge trouble. Looking at the sword in his hand, Jian Wushuang sighed, lightly, as his looks began to turn frosty. Chapter 487, Killing Intent. Chapter 487, Killing Intent. It was indeed huge trouble. As the first sword principal magic weapon of killing in the Divine Land, just how many people coveted it? Among this group of sword principal experts alone, 9 out of 10 were eager to obtain it, except that they did not have the capability to do so. And now, it had recognized Jian Wushuang as its owner right in front of them. How could they not be jealous and goggle-eyed? The strongest among these people are only of superior lord level. This poses no threat to me at present. There's only one person who's a serious threat to me. With chilly eyes, Jian Wushuang looked right over at Su Ming. The latter was standing upright in the void in his usual lofty pose. He too looked back at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang could vaguely detect the killing intent welling up in Su Ming's eyes despite their dull facade. Indeed, he laughed coldly. He was not in the least bit surprised. Su Ming had suppressed the heart-killing sword for over 1,000 years, throughout which he held a sword principal meeting every 100 years when the sword was in a state of agitation. Though this seemed to be an act of kindness, the reality was that deep down, Su Ming had long treated the sword as if it was his possession. Now that it had recognized Jian Wushuang as its owner instead, the real surprise would have been if Su Ming did not want to kill him. I'd planned to wait a little longer, when my strength has increased some, before taking him on. But it now seems that things have to be brought ahead. Jian Wushuang murmured to himself. Su Ming was a traitor of the bloodline of the sword ancestor. The decline of the bloodline was inextricably linked to Su Ming. As a descendant of the bloodline, It was Jian Wushuang's duty to clean things up on behalf of his ancestors if he had the strength to. It was only a matter of time before he challenged Su Ming. Now, the heart-killing sword had simply brought things forward by a little. The crowd of experts, too, looked at Su Ming in anticipation of his reaction. However, contrary to everyone's expectation, Su Ming did not fly into a rage. Instead, keeping his eyes on Jian Wushuang, he calmly asked, "Your Excellency's methods are truly awesome to have fused 3 sword souls into one. May I know thy name?" Jian Wushuang first thought about answering swordsman when he heard Su Ming's inquiry, but after thinking for a bit, he replied, "My name is Jian Wushuang." Jian Wushuang. Su Ming muttered it in repeat. It literally means to have matchless sword principle. You certainly live up to such a fine name. False praise. Jian Wushuang was unflattered. That heart-killing sword has remained here in this valley for over 1,000 years. I'd tried many ways for it to recognize me as its owner, but was never successful. Today, however, it has offered itself to your Excellency, whose capability certainly puts mine to shame, Su Ming said. It was just luck, Jian Wushuang replied casually. Luck? Maybe. Su Ming's lips raised a corner. But after all, as the first sword principal magic weapon in the Divine Land, it has been eyed by many people. Your Excellency must be careful. Don't get killed so shortly after receiving it, or you mightn't even get to use it. Thanks so much for the tip, Master Su Ming. Jian Wushuang coolly acknowledged. All the best. Su Ming laughed callously, then turned and departed. The sword principal experts were astounded by what had they just seen. Gone? He left just like that. He didn't even try to seize back the sword. Is he really willing to let it fall into Jian Wushuang's hands? Willing? That's impossible. The entire Divine Land knows that Master Su Ming is crazy over the heart-killing sword, or he wouldn't have spent a good 1,000 years suppressing it. My view is that Master Su Ming chose not to act here to save face. This is the Sword-suppression Valley after all, and the fact is he'd personally invited Jian Wushuang here. Plus, the sword submitted itself to Jian Wushuang, who neither actively snatched it nor violated any of the valley's rules. It would be beneath Master Su Ming to tussle for the sword in the valley, and his reputation would be ruined if news spread. Of course, this only holds true in the valley. Things may be different outside. The experts chatted freely among themselves. Though they tried to keep their volumes down, Jian Wushuang could clearly hear what they were saying. In response, he laughed indifferently. He was certainly aware of the theory that Master Su Ming chose not to act out right here only so as to not tarnish his reputation, but would be unable to restrain himself once outside the valley. Inhaling a deep breath, Jian Wushuang kept the heart-killing sword in an interspatial ring before he slowly walked forward. Swordsmen, Hunjian Lord and Tianming Lord, were both looking at Jian Wushuang with somewhat complicated expressions. The two of you may leave first, Jian Wushuang said. Sorry, swordsman. The two of us are of little help, Hunjian Lord said with some bitterness. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded with genuine empathy. The person he needed to face this time was Su Ming, against whom even their leader Marquis Piaoxue, let alone them, was of no match. He walked up to Jian Nantian once again. The latter carried a flask of wine in his hand and was busy drinking to himself. His face was its usual indifference, and he only looked around when he saw Jian Wushuang coming toward him. I'd thought I'd caused enough trouble during my time, but it has turned out to be a lot less than what you've done. Father, stop teasing me. Jian Wushuang laughed mildly. Su Ming will certainly not let you off for taking the heart-killing sword. I fear that he'll try to murder you upon the very first step you take out of Sword-suppression Valley. Say, what are your plans? Jian Nantian uttered in a deep voice. What else can I do but take such measures as the situation calls for? The sword has already recognized me as its owner, and I surely cannot return it to him. Besides, it was originally the sword ancestor's magic weapon. Su Ming doesn't deserve to have it, Jian Wushuang responded. Of course, although he claimed he would simply take such measures as the situation called for, he did have a few plans deep down. At the very least, he had a life-saving trump card in his hand. You do seem to have quite the open mind. Jian Nantian glanced at his son and lowered his voice before continuing. I've already sent word for a helper to come forth. He'll need some time to get here. However, you just have to find a way to delay things a little. A helper? Jian Wushuang looked in puzzlement at his father. He was going to be acted upon by none other than one of the 9 sovereigns, Su Ming. What kind of helper would be able to stop such a person? Don't worry. The helper whom I asked for is very powerful and should have no problems stopping Su Ming. Jian Nantian laughed easily. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang could not help lifting his eyebrows. He might not have to resort to his final trump card if the helper was truly that capable. Incidentally, he did not really want to use that card. Chapter 488, Outside the Sword-suppression Valley. Chapter 488, Outside the Sword-suppression Valley. Ladies and gentlemen, the sword principal meeting is over, and my lord has his own business to deal with, so I will have to ask you all to leave now, said the purple-clothed woman who had received the experts when they first arrived. The experts left the valley without hesitation after hearing those words. We're being asked to leave. It seems that they don't want us to stay any longer. Jian Wushuang smiled. Let's go, Jian Nantian said flatly. Then he headed out of the valley with Jian Wushuang. The handsome Su Ming stood at the highest point of the valley, staring at Jian Wushuang's retreating figure off in the distance with a twisted expression on his face. Zizhong. Su Ming spoke. Your Excellency, a purple-robed man came before him. Follow Jian Wushuang. Once he exits the valley, kill him and bring back the heart-killing sword, Su Ming ordered in a low voice. Yes, Your Excellency. The purple-robed man nodded respectfully and began following Jian Wushuang. The heart-killing sword is mine. No one can take it from me. Su Ming's eyes were as cold as ice. However, outside the valley, the experts had yet to walk away. Instead, they were waiting quietly. Look, those two are Marquis Wan Lei and Marquis Nanyu. Right outside the exit stood 2 figures with vigorous auras. They were none other than the 2 marquises from earlier. The marquises were obviously waiting for Jian Nantian. They had wanted to kill Jian Nantian, but for fear of enraging Su Ming, they had waited until this moment, when everyone exited the valley. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian walked out the valley, side by side. They immediately attracted everyone's attention. They came out. Why are they together? Things have become interesting. If we kill Jian Nantian, we'll get 2 Dao weapons, one from Jian Nantian and one from Marquis Xiefeng. As for the Jian Wushuang, he's taken possession of the heart-killing sword and even combined 3 sword souls, which is the first time someone has achieved that in our entire history. He must have some big secrets. If we can kill him, we will earn a lot. The experts who were waiting watched Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian very closely. In their eyes, the 2 were like walking treasures, and killing either one of them could benefit them a lot. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian spotted Marquis Wan Lei and Marquis Nanyu just as they came out of the valley. They're waiting for you. Jian Wushuang cast Jian Nantian a meaningful eye. Just 2 shrimps, Jian Nantian said in a mocking tone. He despised the two marquises, even though they were top experts in this land. How about each of us takes one of them? Jian Wushuang asked his father while smiling. His words showed that he did not take the marquises seriously. Fine. Jian Nantian nodded. I'll take Marquis Wanlei, and you deal with Marquis Nanyu. No problem. Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian charged toward their targets like two flowing lights. Their eyes were fixed on Jian Nantian, so Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu immediately rushed forward the moment they saw Jian Nantian move. Jian Nantian, go to hell! The bad-tempered Marquis Wanlei roared. Save your words. Jian Nantian remained indifferent. In the blink of an eye, the two forces were already within range for close combat. Marquis Nanyu, your opponent is me. Jian Wushuang's voice echoed. A blurry sword shadow stuck out, cutting through the space in front of Marquis Nanyu and forcing him to defend. Marquis Nanyu took out a saber that was surrounded by knife essence and casually blocked the sword shadow with it. Boy, you dare to fight me? Marquis Nanyu shot Jian Wushuang a chilling glance. The Marquis had witnessed how Jian Wushuang combined his 3 sword souls and gained the heart-killing sword, but he did not believe he was capable of possessing such a magic weapon. Therefore, he was not interested in Jian Wushuang or the heart-killing sword. I've heard of the 72 marquises since I entered the Divine Land, but I haven't had a chance to battle a real marquis until now, said Jian Wushuang with a smile. Battle me? While you're only in the Saint Realm. Marquis Nanyu glanced at Jian Wushuang with scorn in his eyes. Despite his excellent performance inside the valley, it didn't change the fact that Jian Wushuang was still in the Saint Realm. As for Marquis Nanyu, he was at the Seven Cloud Realm. So he thought that Jian Wushuang was insane to battle him. Boy, since you're in a rush to die, I'll grant your wish and accept your heart-killing sword. As Marquis Nanyu's words fell, he turned into a shadow. Swish! Jian Wushuang only saw an elusive shadow flashing at a high speed, but he could feel a tempestuous killing intent surrounding him. He narrowed his eyes, ready to use the triple kill sword that was already in his hand. A marquis in the Seven Cloud Realm doesn't deserve to face the heart-killing sword. Jian Wushuang murmured. Behind him, a golden streak of light began to surge as a giant golden sword soul phantom materialized. The phantom, that was over 50 meters tall, appeared once again. An overwhelming sword essence immediately swept the area. If it had been before Jian Wushuang entered Sword-suppression Valley, he would have fled when facing a marquis. However, things had changed in the valley. He had experienced the 1,000-sword salute, and his power had skyrocketed. More than condensing 7 slaughter origin marks, he had also succeeded in combining his sword souls. He could tell that, even though he now only had 1 sword soul phantom, this golden phantom was more powerful than the previous 3 added together and could allow him to display even more power. I can't wait to see how powerful my new sword soul is. Jian Wushuang licked his lips. The space in front of him was sliced open as Marquis Nanyu's saber drew near. Chapter 489, Killed on the Spot. Chapter 489, Killed on the Spot. The blow split the air, and before it even struck Jian Wushuang, its waves had already left a bottomless saber mark on the land below them. Jian Wushuang's eyes darkened as he leaped forward and swung the triple kill sword at his opponent. The sword light was like a bolt of lightning that would continue moving forward until it struck its enemies. Jian Wushuang displayed the second move of the heart-killing sword technique, Desperation. The golden sword soul phantom that was behind Jian Wushuang also attacked at the same time. The power from his sword soul exploded forth. At the same time, the 7 slaughter origin marks were activated and released their full power. The sword light became as dazzling as the sun. Marquis Nanyu's killing intent continued increasing, and his blow became even more fierce. Die, he growled hoarsely, with a grim look on his face. The two faced each other head-on, and they both used their full power. Neither one of them was taking it easy. Marquis Nanyu, as a marquis in the 7-cloud realm, was quite confident about his power. He intended to defeat this insignificant opponent, who was only in the Saint realm, using a single strike. However, his opponent, Jian Wushuang, also had confidence in his strength. With only his 7 slaughter origin marks, he might be slightly inferior to Marquis Nanyu, but he also had the heavenly creation skill and a strong body to help make up the difference, as well as the heart-killing sword technique from the sword ancestor. Most importantly, he had his sword soul. He was backed by the power of the strongest sword soul. All added together, Jian Wushuang's attack was something that could shake the world. Boom! The two blows collided, and the two formidable forces exploded. The whole area quivered as a visible blast wave swept over everything as it rippled out from the point of impact. It caused the sky to tremble and the ground to crack open. When the blast wave hit a mountain, the mountain was crushed into dust. Step back. The experts who had been watching the battle from off in the distance drew back even farther when they saw the wave, afraid to unintentionally get involved. The whole battlefield was a surging storm of power. Swish! Suddenly, a figure shot out from the storm like a bullet. The figure kept rolling as he flew backwards, and didn't stop until he was hundreds of meters away. After regaining his balance, the figure's face flushed red, and he spat out a mouthful of blood onto the ground. Opposite the figure, a youthful figure walked out of the storm with a long sword in hand. The young figure was Jian Wushuang. Your power doesn't live up to your name, Marquis Nanyu. His words resounded throughout the area. The onlookers were muddled by what they had seen. Marquis Nanyu was not weaker than them. How is this possible? I'm a marquis in the 7-cloud realm. He is only in the Saint realm. How could I be overpowered by him when fighting head-to-head? He was completely overpowered. He had been knocked back hundreds of meters by that one strike and was injured to the point that he coughed up blood. But it should have been Jian Wushuang that was overpowered, not him. The result was totally beyond the Marquis's expectations. How could that boy defeat a Marquis? Confusion rocked everyone's mind. They were all in shock because they didn't know that Jian Wushuang was not just an ordinary expert in the Saint realm. His cultivation followed a path that defied the heavens with every step he took. A normal Saint realm expert would step into the cloud realm after condensing 3 origin marks, but Jian Wushuang had condensed 7 origin marks, which was the same number of marks as Marquis Nanyu. The difference was that Jian Wushuang possessed origin marks while the Marquis had clouds, which were much more powerful. Jian Wushuang had overcome the difference by depending on the heavenly creation skill and his strong body. That was to say, even without his sword soul, Jian Wushuang still had a chance of beating Marquis Nanyu, but by using it, he was able to overpower him. Jian Wushuang stood there, towering above him, holding a sword. As he pointed forward, a vast blood river flowed in that direction. Relying on his current power, he could cover the whole battlefield with road to the underworld. He displayed both the 100-fold realm and blood-fire domain at the same time. The 3 techniques worked together and suppressed Marquis Nanyu. Damn! Marquis Nanyu's expression changed. He was being suppressed by a mighty force and was not able to display his full power. He didn't do his best. Marquis Nanyu shot Jian Wushuang a horrified look at which point he noticed a trace of killing intent in Jian Wushuang's eyes. The Marquis became frightened out of his wits. It never occurred to him that he would fear someone in the Saint Realm to such an extent, but he was truly afraid. He knew that he was no match for Jian Wushuang. "Run!" Marquis Nanyu began to flee without any hesitation. He was too frightened to think of protecting his reputation. Regardless of whether it was fame, treasures, or Dao weapons, nothing mattered more than his life. "You want to run away? You're running nowhere." Seeing Marquis Nanyu's intention, Jian Wushuang smiled coldly. With a flash, he left behind a shadow as he moved effortlessly through the Blood River. It only took him an instant to catch up with Marquis Nanyu. "Marquis Nanyu, go to hell." Indifferent words escaped Jian Wushuang's mouth, sentencing Marquis Nanyu to death. Marquis Nanyu turned around upon hearing the words and saw Jian Wushuang's sword flying towards him like lightning again. The sword was so fast that he knew he had no chance, even if he had not been suppressed by the realm technique. "No!" Marquis Nanyu screamed miserably before he was pierced by the triple kill sword. Marquis. Chapter 490, Enemies Arrive. Chapter 490, Enemies Arrive. Marquis Nanyu died with his eyes wide opened. His body fell from the air. The place was dead silent, and the onlookers were stunned. A super expert in the divine land, one of the 72 marquises, Marquis Nanyu, was killed before their very eyes, and it was done by a Saint Realm expert. A Saint Realm expert killed a Marquis with using his full power, and Marquis Nanyu couldn't even run away. Jian Wushuang is indeed powerful. I never thought there would be such a horrifying Saint Realm expert in the divine land. How could a Saint Realm expert be so strong? Everyone was completely shocked. However, before they could calm down, another daunting force exploded from a different battlefield. An enchanting sword shadow came into view and attracted everyone's attention. The attack was mysterious, and the power behind it reached its peak because of the Dao weapon. Jian Nantian, who launched the attack, looked indifferent, but there was still a hint of killing intent gathered in his eyes. "Shit!" Marquis Wanlei, Jian Nantian's opponent, turned pale when he saw the attack, but he still tried to block it. However, Jian Nantian's sword still knocked his giant axe away and pierced straight through him. Marquis Wanlei had been killed as well. He died because he had underestimated Jian Nantian. He didn't know that before the 1,000-sword salute took place, Jian Nantian had already killed a superior lord and 2 advanced lords with a single blow. At that time, he was already as powerful as an ordinary marquis. With a great opportunity like the 1,000-sword salute, it was only natural that Jian Nantian had progressed a lot. Besides that Jian Nantian had stepped into the Seven-Cloud realm, he possessed excellent swordsmanship, and he also had a Dao weapon. Thus, he was definitely much more powerful than Marquis Wanlei. In such a short amount of time, both Marquis Wanlei and Marquis Nanyu had been killed. However, Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian did not appear to be proud. They knew very well that the 2 marquises were just ordinary Seven-Cloud realm experts without any Dao weapons. They regarded them as shrimps and had not taken them seriously from the very beginning. The one behind the 2 was their real concern. "He's here." Jian Nantian's dark eyes turned towards the sky, where a figure off in the distance was slowly becoming more and more clear. Behind the figure was a large red cloud. A moment later, the figure finally arrived in front of Jian Nantian. The figure wore a red robe and had red hair. He carried a blood-red saber on his back and turbulent red clouds following behind him. Standing there, he seemed like an Asura from the hell. "Jian Nantian." The figure's eyes were fixed on Jian Nantian, with a barely suppressed killing intent in them. Marquis Xiefeng, Jian Nantian replied calmly. The figure, Marquis Xiefeng, was extremely powerful and had been chasing after Jian Nantian during these last few days. He even offered a Dao weapon to anyone who could kill Jian Nantian. Being ranked within the top 2 among the 72 marquises in the Divine Land demonstrated how powerful he was. The dead Marquis, Wan Lei, and Marquis Nanyu were marquises as well, but they were no match for Marquis Xiefeng. Marquis Xiefeng appeared on the battlefield with a killing intent that was so overwhelming the onlookers could not help holding their breath. The Marquis looked down at Marquis Wan Lei's dead body. It seems that your power increased substantially during the meeting. You were even able to kill Wan Lei, Marquis Xiefeng said icily. However, I still look down on you, and you will see how miserably the murderer of my sworn brothers will end. Really? Show me then. Jian Nantian stared at Marquis Xiefeng calmly. You're courting death. Without wasting any more words, Marquis Xiefeng began to move forward, and the turbulent red cloud that filled sky behind him moved forward as well. 3 sword soul phantoms shot up behind Jian Nantian and rushed towards the Marquis while radiating an overwhelming sword essence. Marquis Xiefeng. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes while watching the scene taking place in front of him. Marquis Xiefeng is in the 8-cloud realm and possesses a Dao weapon. He is much more powerful than Wan Lei. I hope Father can deal with him. Jian Wushuang was lost in thought when a purple streak of flowing light suddenly emerged in front of him. Jian Wushuang looked toward the light and realized it was a man. He was a burly man clothed in purple. His grand aura revealed his identity as a marquis, one that was more powerful than Marquis Nanyu. He is Marquis Zizhong. Someone recognized the man and called out his name in surprise. Marquis Zizhong was a top marquis among the 72 marquises in the Divine Land. He was also in the 8-cloud realm, and he even possessed a Dao weapon, so he was just a little bit weaker than Marquis Xiefeng. Jian Wushuang. Marquis Zizhong looked toward Jian Wushuang as his frigid voice echoed, "Give me the heart-killing sword, and I'll spare your life." Spare my life? Don't talk like you can kill me. Marquis Zizhong, you don't have the ability to take my life, so tell your boss to come out and do it himself, Jian Wushuang said with a sneer. Jian Wushuang knew very well that Marquis Zizhong was trying to seize the heart-killing sword under someone's order. There was no doubt that the person who gave him the order was Su Ming. No need to call anyone else. I can kill you on my own. Marquis Zizhong's expression was ice-cold as he gripped the cyan long spear in his hand, the head of which was sharp and gleamed with a metallic luster. Marquis Zizhong made a sudden move, and the spear pierced through the air, approaching Jian Wushuang. So fast, Jian Wushuang frowned, but his eyes were filled with battle intent. Good. Since you want to fight, let's fight. Chapter 491, Finally Unbearable. Chapter 491, Finally Unbearable. Boom. The 18-foot-tall golden sword soul phantom was like a matchless fiend beneath the heavens. As Jian Wushuang began marching forward, this golden sword soul phantom also suddenly stepped forward and swung its longsword. Power instantly erupted from the sword soul and fought with Marquis Zizhong head-on. Then, the boundless blood river gushed out toward Marquis Zizhong to restrain him. Previously, Jian Wushuang almost had to use his full strength to seriously injure Marquis Nanyu while he was using a normal sword, but the battle strength of Marquis Zizhong was obviously superior to that of Marquis Nanyu. With the power of the Dao weapon in hand, Marquis Zizhong and Jian Wushuang were evenly matched in one-on-one close combat, both in speed and skill. But now Marquis Zizhong could only grapple with Jian Wushuang. As for what he said earlier about slaying Jian Wushuang, it was obviously impossible. In this regard, Marquis Zizhong was helplessly reaching his limit. His Excellency, Su Ming wanted me to slay Jian Wushuang and bring back the heart-killing sword, but who would have thought that this boy was only in the saint realm? How is his battle strength this incredible? Marquis Zizhong thought, from the bottom of his heart. Before Jian Wushuang and Marquis Nanyu's one-on-one fight, Marquis Zizhong also thought he knew what the outcome would be, but after seeing Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship severely injure Marquis Nanyu, he knew that he would not be able to kill Jian Wushuang alone. We can only wait for His Excellency Su Ming to handle this. Marquis Zizhong seemed to have intentionally or unintentionally been searching the surrounding area. He knew that His Excellency Su Ming must be hiding somewhere close, but he just hadn't appeared. It was because of this that he knew he couldn't kill Jian Wushuang. Yet, he was fighting like crazy with Jian Wushuang, trying to kill him. He just wanted Su Ming to see that he had tried his best, and that the opponent was too strong for him to kill. On the battlefield, the fierce battle between Jian Wushuang and Marquis Zizhong had reached the white-hot stage. The two men were colliding head-on and turning into residual shadows from time to time, then chasing and dodging each other at an alarming speed within the battlefield. But no matter how hard they fought, it was difficult to tell who would win or lose. Marquis Zizhong is worthy of the title Marquis. I'm afraid that even 10 Marquis Nanyus combined couldn't be compared to him, thought Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, who was in the middle of the fight, suddenly looked at Marquis Zizhong and said, "Your strength demands that I use the heart-killing sword." Jian Wushuang's voice instantly lowered and his wrist moved. The triple-kill sword disappeared, replaced by a wicked long sword that exuded an unusually bloodthirsty sensation. "This is the first time I have used this sword. I wonder how powerful it is," Jian Wushuang thought, and then smirked. However, this smirk caused the facial expression of Marquis Zizhong to change greatly. Damn it! When Marquis Zizhong saw the wicked longsword in Jian Wushuang's hand, his pupils suddenly contracted. The heart-killing sword was the #1 killing sword in the vast divine land. Marquis Zizhong didn't know how powerful it was. He only knew that Jian Wushuang fought to a draw with him while using the triple-kill sword, which was merely a first-grade magic weapon. Now, if he used the heart-killing sword. After all, the heart-killing sword is the best weapon for someone who practices sword principle. With Jian Wushuang's strength, he only needs to show a little bit of its power, and he will be able to completely suppress me, Marquis Zizhong thought fearfully. When he saw Jian Wushuang preparing to use the heart-killing sword, a sense of unrest began to grow in Marquis Zizhong's heart. However, even though he wanted to leave, he was already being suppressed by Jian Wushuang's Blood River realm, which prevented him from leaving without Jian Wushuang's permission. Jian Wushuang's residual shadow gradually disappeared from where he had just been, and a vibrating ghost-like figure instantly moved through the Blood River, appearing in front of Marquis Zizhong. A sword slash immediately swept out, accompanied by a slicing sound. This sword, carrying a decisive and unwavering intent, was the second move of the heart-killing sword technique Desperation. As if acknowledging Jian Wushuang as its master, the heart-killing sword shook crazily at that moment and exploded with power that soared to the heavens. Jian Wushuang's attack seemed to have reached the pinnacle of terror. Perhaps another person could display similar swordsmanship, but Jian Wushuang had performed a secret technique of the heart-killing sword Desperation. If it was compared to the power released when he used the triple-kill sword, this time the technique was several times more powerful. I can't stop this sword strike. Seeing this attack in action, and feeling the immense power it emanated, Marquis Zizhong wore a terrified look on his face. However, the sword did not land on Marquis Zizhong's body. Instead, it struck the space in front of him. The empty space was torn apart, and a white-robed human figure immediately emerged from it. As soon as the white-robed man appeared, he countered with a strong sword essence. This sword essence, with just its first counterattack, pushed almost everything back towards Jian Wushuang, causing Jian Wushuang to become unsettled and the sword in his hand to become still. After regaining his stance and composure, Jian Wushuang squinted to get a better look at this newcomer. The large number of sword principle experts in the area who were watching the fight all focused their attention on the white-robed man who suddenly appeared. Has he really come? They wondered. None of the sword principle experts were surprised by the unexpected appearance of the white-robed man. Everyone knew that he would never give up on the heart-killing sword so easily. Jian Wushuang also gazed at the newcomer. The corners of the white-robed man's mouth were smeared with a peculiar curve-like paint. It's finally unbearable, spoke the white-robed man. The white-robed man, with a handsome demon-like face, was one of the 9 sovereigns in the vast divine land, and also the owner of Sword-suppression Valley, Sword Demon Su Ming. Su Ming had suppressed the heart-killing sword in Sword-suppression Valley for thousands of years. He already regarded the heart-killing sword as his own. At the sword principle meeting in Sword-suppression Valley, the heart-killing sword had been acknowledged as one of the most powerful weapons. Would Su Ming willingly let it go? While they were inside the Sword-suppression Valley, Su Ming was afraid of losing his prestige and reputation, since it was inappropriate for him to handle this matter in the presence of guests. Even outside of the Sword-suppression Valley, Su Ming allowed Marquis Zizhong to try settling matters first while he stayed in the dark. He still could not come forward, so he naturally did not come forward. But when he realized Marquis Zizhong also could not deal with Jian Wushuang, he had no alternative but to do it himself. His Excellency, Su Ming, said Marquis Zizhong while bowing respectfully. I have tried my best. Marquis Zizhong finished what he wanted to say. I noticed, Su Ming answered. Then he nodded and gestured a dismissive wave towards Marquis Zizhong. It was appropriate for Marquis Zizhong to step aside. He knew that the arrival of Su Ming meant he was no longer needed. Su Ming still possessed his arrogant posture while looking at Jian Wushuang, who stood directly in front of him. When he saw the heart-killing sword in Jian Wushuang's hand, his pupils secretly narrowed in on it. He immediately revealed a cold smile. The sword is good, but the one who is using it is too weak, remarked Su Ming. Ha ha, Your Excellency, Su Ming is right. I am weak. I cannot even use 10% of the heart-killing sword's power. However, it doesn't matter how much of its power I can use, because I'm still better off than the people who don't even have enough ability to be recognized by the heart-killing sword. All they can do is look on in despair, right? Jian Wushuang responded while smiling. Chapter 492, Illusory Sword Principle. Chapter 492, Illusory Sword Principle. Those who were not qualified can only look on in despair. Upon hearing this, numerous sword principle experts suddenly had an odd look on their faces. Obviously, Jian Wushuang was mocking Su Ming. After all, Su Ming had possessed the heart-killing sword for thousands of years, but he had not been able to bind it. How bold, Su Ming said, as a silver of coldness flashed through his beautiful face. He stared at Jian Wushuang. It's been a long time since someone dared talk to me like this. Since you've said so much, you won't be able to leave here. Even if I had not said those words, you would not let me go, right? Jian Wushuang wore a cold smile. Su Ming, you don't have to pretend to be noble. If you want the heart-killing sword, make your move. Since you are courting death, I will make your dream come true, Su Ming said. Then a sword appeared in his hands. It was a dreamlike sword with an almost transparent body. Su Ming held the sword while radiating an overwhelming sword essence. Jian Wushuang looked grim. Sword demon, Su Ming was different from Marquis Nanyu and Marquis Zizhong. Though he was at the Eight-Cloud realm, he had reached the Tao. The Tao was the supreme level superior to the origin. If an expert reached the Tao, his strength would experience a dramatic change. Boy, are you ready to die? Su Ming stared at Jian Wushuang as if he was looking at a dead person. Come on. Jian Wushuang gripped the heart-killing sword tightly, while the 180-foot golden sword's soul phantom emanated a mighty aura. Su Ming sneered, then he casually swung his dreamlike longsword. It seemed like a casual and slow movement. However, the moment he attacked, a colorful, dreamlike sword light appeared in the sky. The streak of sword light was charming. Jian Wushuang was shocked. In that instant, he saw a different scene. Schwanger, help, help! Jian Wushuang heard a terrified voice and looked over. He saw his father, who had been indifferent earlier, fleeing in panic while being chased by a grinning Marquis Xiefeng, who was brandishing his saber. Dad! Jian Wushuang panicked. No! Jian Nantian uttered a forlorn scream. Jian Wushuang saw his father's body being split in two by Marquis Xiefeng. He was shocked, but he immediately realized that it was not real. Illusion, it's an illusion! Wake up! Be quick! Jian Wushuang snarled in his heart. He suddenly gritted his teeth and tried his best to disentangle himself from the illusion. When he regained consciousness, he noticed that the heart-stopping attack was less than 1 meter away from him. He had no chance of parrying it, so he could only try to dodge. Su Ming had originally aimed his attack at the young man's head, but Jian Wushuang moved, so the sword light passed by next to his ear and landed on his right shoulder. Whoosh! A huge sword wound appeared on his shoulder, and blood began flowing out of it. Luckily, Jian Wushuang had a powerful body, otherwise his right arm would have been chopped off. While ignoring the sharp pain in his arm, Jian Wushuang quickly retreated. Su Ming still stood in the air, slowly sheathing his long sword. You were able to escape from my illusory sword principle. Very impressive. Su Ming sneered while looking at the young man. Jian Wushuang was terrified. He did not expect Su Ming to possess a swordsmanship which contained a terrifying illusion. Illusory sword principle. Jian Wushuang could not help nodding in private. The Tao was worthy of being the supreme level superior to the origin. It was terrifying indeed. If he had not reacted to the attack in time, his head would have been split in half. My illusory sword principle is marvelous. Few marquises could parry it. You should be proud of yourself since you did not die from that attack, Su Ming said. Jian Wushuang looked grim and began activating the soul-devouring secret skill in his mind. Soul-devouring secret skill. Jian Wushuang had not used soul-devouring secret skill ever since he arrived at the Divine Land. It placed a heavy burden on his body. So, unless it was a critical moment, Jian Wushuang was unwilling to use it. He had not experienced a truly desperate fight in the Divine Land yet. But now, he had to rely on it to save himself. Jian Wushuang instantly radiated a terrifying power, which seemed like it could devour everything. He was activating the second volume of the soul-devouring secret skill, the highest level. Boom. In an instant, the whole area began to shake. Jian Wushuang's body seemed to be a black hole that could devour everything as a stream of natural power from everything in the area began rushing into his body at an amazing speed. The ground below became dry and cracked. In the blink of an eye, the land within a radius of dozens of meters had become lifeless. The spectators were panic-stricken. What a frightening skill. What happened? He is actually devouring natural power. The spectators exclaimed in amazement. Just a small trick. Su Ming sneered. Eventually, Jian Wushuang stopped devouring the energy, but his aura had already improved to a new level. Of course, it also placed a heavy burden on him. Jian Wushuang pointed towards the space ahead of him with his blood-red eyes. Azura's secret skill, Bridge of Helplessness. Buzz, a terrifying power erupted, and a huge blood bridge appeared above the blood river, slowly stretching toward the end of the river. Jian Wushuang, who was covered by a scarlet armor, stepped onto the bridge. Jian Wushuang's aura soared once again. He glanced at Su Ming. Then, in the next moment, he moved. Chapter 493, Counterattack. Chapter 493, Counterattack. Whoosh! A streak of flowing light darted out. Now, a mighty blood river was surging towards Su Ming. Jian Wushuang appeared in front of his opponent, and the heart-killing sword let out a shrill whistle as the 180-foot golden sword Soul Phantom attacked with a long sword. It was a brilliant, intoxicating stroke. The spectators could not help but be enchanted by it. It was the third move of the heart-killing sword technique, Enchant. Jian Wushuang had just recently comprehended it when he saw the Thousand Sword Salute. The first move of the heart-killing sword technique was relatively weak, but each move was stronger than the previous one. Therefore, the third move was obviously more powerful than the second one, Desperation. Even a marquis would be terrified by the power of this brilliant attack. But Su Ming sneered while casually brandishing his dreamlike longsword again. As a result, Jian Wushuang's strongest move was easily deflected by him. He blocked my attack so easily. Jian Wushuang was astonished. He used his full strength to perform soul-devouring secret skill and used the heart-killing sword to perform his strongest move, which was powerful enough to kill any marquis, but Su Ming easily parried it. Both sovereigns and marquises were at the Cloud Realm, but was the former really that much stronger than the latter? Humph! Jian Wushuang snorted. He immediately struck out with several palms in succession. Azura's secret skill, 18 levels of hell. Buzz. A mighty power erupted as a towering scarlet pavilion descended into the mighty blood river. It had 18 floors with ghost shadows visible on each floor, as its overwhelming power began surging towards Su Ming. At this moment, a sword light also gushed out of Jian Wushuang's mind's eye. Instantly, a terrifying sword essence shot out. It was the first-grade sword technique, Mind's Eye. Ever since he first learned this sword skill, he had been storing sword essence between his eyes, but he rarely had an opportunity to use it, so the sword essence became more and more powerful. At this moment, he released all of the sword essence he had been saving at once. The stream of sword essence changed into a streak of dazzling sword light, lashing out with a power strong enough to kill a marquis. Su Ming stood there peacefully. Even though the lofty scarlet pavilion suppressed him, he was only shocked for a second and still kept his calm. In the blink of an eye, the overwhelming sword essence had appeared before Su Ming. Su Ming snorted. When he raised his head, his mind's eye suddenly split and unleashed a gush of sword essence, which was more powerful than what Jian Wushuang released. He easily blocked the attack from the mind's eye sword technique. After seeing that, Jian Wushuang stared at his opponent with an extremely cold look and said, "Time for my last killing move." Su Ming frowned and felt something happen behind him. At the same time as he smashed the sword essence, a streak of golden light with an overwhelming power rushed toward his back at a terrifying speed. A scarlet figure with a cold look stood behind him while holding a gold longbow, the Dragon King bow. The golden light, which was not far from Su Ming, was actually the Dragon King arrow with icy heart poison. The blood puppet and Dragon King arrow were Jian Wushuang's final killing move. Jian Wushuang had performed some powerful techniques, but he did not actually expect those skills to kill Su Ming. His only hope was the Dragon King arrow, or, more precisely, the icy heart poison that was on it. As long as the Dragon King arrow scratched Su Ming's skin, the icy heart poison should be strong enough to kill him. Therefore, Jian Wushuang let Blood Puppet wait at the side for an opportunity to launch this killing move. Jian Wushuang had an ingenious plan. He exerted his full strength to perform techniques that would attract his opponent's attention, especially the 18 levels of hell, which shocked Su Ming. Then the Mind's Eye sword technique and Dragon King arrow were displayed in succession, so that Su Ming would not notice the second attack. When the golden light was 1 meter away from him, he finally felt it. At such a close distance, Su Ming was utterly unable to react. I succeeded. A flicker of delight flashed through his eyes. He watched as the Dragon King arrow pierced Su Ming. However, no blood appeared. The Dragon King arrow did not seem to touch anything and continued shooting forward at its previous speed. Swish! The gold light, like a comet with a long tail, eventually landed on a nearby mountain. The Dragon King arrow left a big hole on the mountainside. As the icy heart poison pervaded the mountain, the huge mountain became white and was quickly covered by an icy fog. Clap! At this point, the mountain cracked into pieces. It chilled all the spectators to the bone. Tut, what a terrifying toxin. Luckily, I have the illusory sword principle, or I would have been wounded and killed by your toxin. Cold laughter rang out. Jian Wushuang saw Su Ming speak again with a completely uninjured body. Chapter 494, Blind Emperor. Chapter 494, Blind Emperor. How is that possible? The Dragon King arrow obviously pierced his body. Jian Wushuang turned pale. He thought his killing move worked. Normally, Su Ming should not have been able to dodge it, but Su Ming had actually succeeded in escaping. It must be because of his illusory sword principle, Jian Wushuang thought to himself. The Tao was mysterious, so it was normal that Su Ming had some remarkable abilities. Boy, you're just a Saint Realm expert, but your skills are amazing. What a pity. It's meaningless in front of real strength. Su Ming wore a faint smile, while his dreamlike longsword became dazzling. Go to hell, Su Ming said. He lifted his dreamlike longsword up and was about to attack again. Jian Wushuang was frightened at this moment. He had experienced illusory sword principle. The illusion was so real that he did not have the confidence to deal with it. Buzz! A flow of immaterial sword essence suddenly rose nearby. It looked somewhat bleak and sad, but aroused Su Ming's attention. This sovereign stopped and looked over toward the source of the sword essence. An old figure slowly walked over. He was a scruffy elder with white hair and black skin. On his skinny face, there were many black freckles. He opened his eyes, but his pupils were white. Obviously, he was blind. All the sword principle experts could not help but look at him. Jian Nantian was fighting fiercely with Marquis Xiefeng, and it was hard to tell who would be the winner. However, when the scruffy elder appeared, Jian Nantian smiled faintly. He finally came. The blind, scruffy elder was the person Jian Nantian had asked for help. The scruffy elder took stout steps and stopped by Jian Wushuang's side. Su Ming, who had been arrogant, looked at the scruffy elder with a cold look. "Blind man, you are still alive," Su Ming said coldly. You, a traitor, are still alive. Why should I die so easily? The scruffy elder said indifferently. Traitor! Jian Wushuang was intrigued by this information. Judging from the way the elder spoke, Jian Wushuang knew he also belonged to the bloodline of the sword ancestor. This Marquis Zizhong curiously stared at the scruffy elder. Then his expression changed as he became shocked and terrified. Blind Emperor, it's you! Marquis Zizhong cried in an unbelievable tone. His voice reverberated through the whole area. Numerous sword principle experts heard those two words. Exclamations rang out in succession. Blind Emperor? Which one? He is Blind Emperor, one of the 7 sword emperors from the bloodline of the sword ancestor. Right, that's him. Except for him, who else would dare to call himself Blind Emperor in the divine land? He didn't die. Numerous sword principle experts were shocked. Many of them were knowledgeable, so they knew that the bloodline of the sword ancestor was the overlord of the divine land thousands of years ago, and that, apart from sword ancestor, the 7 sword emperors were the strongest. Each one of the sword emperors was a supreme expert. It was said that the top 3 had reached the Tao and had the battle strength of a sovereign. For thousands of years, sword ancestor and the 7 sword emperor were the backbones of the sword ancestor's bloodline. No force could stand up to them. Even the 3 ancestors could not fight against the bloodline of the sword ancestor. Blind Emperor was one of the 7. No one in the area had expected that Blind Emperor was still alive. Thousands of years ago, the bloodline of the sword ancestor suffered some dramatic changes. Sword ancestor died, and his bloodline collapsed. Numerous experts and disciples were killed, and only a few escaped to the Nanyang continent. It was said that the 7 sword emperors were killed. Now, Blind Emperor had reappeared in front of everyone. Blind man, you actually survived that fight thousands of years ago. You're quite lucky. Su Ming stared at Blind Emperor and sneered. Now you want to save this boy. Since I'm here, I won't let you be so unbridled, Blind Emperor said in a low voice. Only you? How could you block me? Su Ming smiled with scorn. Have a try. You'll understand. Blind Emperor snorted, and a sword appeared in his hand. That is, Jian Wushuang was shocked. The sword was similar to his triple-kill sword in form, size, and color, but this sword was more powerful. It had reached the Tao weapon level. Blind Emperor swung the long sword and stabbed forward. Shua, the spectators who comprehended sword principle, were dumbfounded because they saw Blind Emperor stab at nothing. Blind Emperor has not only lost his sight, but also his senses as well. Many experts thought. They did not understand why Blind Emperor launched such an attack, but they were shocked by what happened next. A figure suddenly appeared in the empty space where Blind Emperor stabbed. It was Su Ming. What? The spectators were stunned. They did not know what on earth had happened. Only Jian Wushuang realized the reason. No wonder I missed him with my Dragon King arrow. I actually fell into his illusion from the beginning. He let his phantom appear in one spot, while his real body stayed in another. Jian Wushuang thought in private.